Adrian N. Breitfelder, City Clerk, you are hereby directed to call a special session of the City Council to be held on Wednesday, April 9th, 2025 at 6:30 p.m. in the historic Federal Building for the purpose of receiving presentations on certain fiscal year 2026 department budgets.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to a special session of the Dubuque City Council for April 9th, 2025. As a reminder to our participants, you can provide in-person input or virtual audio and written input during tonight's budget presentations. Input options during the live meeting include in-person attendees may approach the podium when the mayor asks if there is any public input for the presentation they would like to speak to. Remote attendees can log in to GoToMeeting using the login links, phone numbers, and access code that appear on the broadcast and live stream and posted on the front page of the meeting agenda. This option includes audio input and written chat input. If you are participating via computer, indicate which presentation you would like to speak to in the chat function, or note that you would like to speak during the appropriate section. If you are participating via phone, indicate which presentation you would like to speak to during the appropriate section. All comments, whether in person or virtual, must be accompanied by a name and address. Additionally, written public input is accepted by contacting the City Council directly from the city's webpage at www.cityofdubuque.org/councilcontacts and through the City Clerk's office email at ctyclerk@cityofdubuque.org. This information will be reiterated during the meeting. Attendance for the session is as follows. Mayor Kavanaugh.
Here.
Council members Farber.
Here.
Jones.
Here.
Resnick.
Here.
Roussel.
Unmuted.
So I think we were just unmuted. Councilmember Roussel, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you. I'm here.
Great, thank you. Sprank.
Here.
Wethel.
Here.
City Manager Van Milligan.
Here.
Thank you. So we will turn it over to our budget presentations.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you everyone for coming tonight. Our first budget presentation this evening is from the Parks Department. So it's Parks and Recreation night, so we will kick it off. Eric, if you could flip the switch, please, so we see the presentation on our screens. We'd appreciate that.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Marie Ware, and I'm the Parks and Recreation Director. And just to kick it off real quick, we wanted to be able to share whom our, well, gee, we didn't even change that slide. You see your first error right when you put it up there. We used to be called Leisure Services, and now we're Parks and Recreation. So we have a leadership team here this evening. So Dan Kroger is our Recreation Division Manager, whom you'll hear from. Steve Faisal is our Park Division Manager. Jared Charland is our Project and Facilities Manager that works with our 4 facilities. And Angie Metcalf is new to us this year, and she is our Lead Administrative Assistant. Without this leadership team, it would be difficult to do all of the things that we're going to share this evening. Additionally, we always have to thank, and each one of them will talk about it, but the thing about the Parks and Recreation Department is there's only so many full-time employees. And when you look at our FTE units, the absolute majority of that is all of our temporary employees that we bring on. It's all those people that you see in the summer, in the parks, mowing. They might be doing lifeguarding. They might be teaching lessons in playgrounds all over the place. Those are the people many times that our residents know, because they're the ones in the field that are working directly with our residents, enjoying our programs and our facilities. We could not do it without them, and so we need to offer them a great deal of thanks. One of the things that you know is we have our Comprehensive Parks Master Plan that we just have started out, and we had some sessions with staff over, it was last week. And one of the things that really came out of it, a key theme that the consultants came back to us already and said, your employees have so much pride in what they do. And that is attributed to each one of them coming to work every day and really doing the best that they can with the resources that we have for them. So just know that you have a lot of hardworking people that are very proud of what they do and are proud of being public servants. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve to be able to do the Parks Division presentation.
Thanks, Marie. Good evening, Mayor, council members, city staff. Yeah, that was my fault. That was my slide, so I apologize for the mistake there. We're still transitioning, so Yeah, so tonight, I'm Steve Faisal, I'm the Park Division Manager. I'm going to kick off our night of presentations here and do our fiscal year 2026 budget presentation for the Park Division. So the Parks Division is approximately just under 40 full-time equivalents. This does not include our improvement level package that we'll talk about later on. However, we've got a wide variety of staff on board. There's many things we do, including horticulture, forestry, natural resources, and we also have our own mechanic on staff, which is great, and 2 confidential account clerks that support both the Parks and Rec side. And we also hire about 30 temporary employees in the summer to keep things going and keep parks looking great. It's a quick snapshot of our team on the park side. Currently, right now, we are interviewing for maintenance technicians, so we have 1 vacancy within the department at the moment, but hopefully we'll have that filled in the next month or so here. So happy soon here we'll be back to full staff. Hasn't happened a lot over the years. We've retired a lot of people in our department, so it seems like we always seem to have a vacancy, but 1 is pretty good for us. Also like to recognize our Park and Rec Commission and those members that volunteer to be on our commission and provide some advisory counsel for us. I like to talk a little bit about, and I do this every year during our budget presentation, is that yes, it's the Park Division budget presentation, but we're much more than parks. We have 50 parks in our system. We're currently developing 3 more, and we have a couple more on the docket coming up this year. So lots of places and spaces to recreate, but we also have 30 miles of trail that we maintain. As I mentioned earlier, the forestry division is a big part of our department. So we're responsible for all the trees between the curb and the sidewalk, and also park trees and other city property trees. So our tree crew is very active right now trying to maintain our urban canopy. Flowers and landscape beds is another area that we take very great pride in, providing that beautification of the city throughout the seasons. We do have our own greenhouse. We manage that in-house with our horticulturist, and we approximately, each year, we manage over 350 hanging flower baskets. Gateways and corridors. A lot of those other things we do, we're in a lot of places and spaces. Quick story about the Kerper Boulevard roundabout. We had engineering department, John Deans, come to us and say, hey, you guys, because we end up maintaining the roundabouts once they're landscaped. So John Dean said, hey, would you guys be willing to design the roundabout? So our horticulturist, Kelly, got with her staff. They came up with a design, a sustainable design. And if you drive around the roundabout in the last week or so, we kind of a cool project. All the grass that you see is eco grass, so it will not need to be mowed. It kind of just lays over. And they planted, I don't even know the number of crocus bulbs, and they're all popping up right now. So if you get a chance to go down around the Kerper roundabout, it's kind of cool because crocuses will come up and then they'll go away, and then we'll have that eco grass, and then we'll have all kinds of different native plantings within this to promote our pollinators as well. So kind of a neat project that we did and developed in-house. So I thought that was kind of fun. Additionally, we do maintenance in both of our industrial centers at Technology Park and also Industrial Center West. We are responsible for maintenance on the downtown Main Street corridor, Iowa Street, and some other places, including Town Clock. So the net property tax support for our ask for our departments, a little under $4 million, which is a cost of $61.22 for the average homeowner. Public safety is a big part of what we do as well. We are heavily involved in typically a lot of emergency storm response, especially tree damage, as you can see in this photo, snow removal, flood cleanup. We also know that from a flood or from a public safety perspective that parks provide safe places for people to enjoy. Okay, so some prior year highlights. As I mentioned, we're in the process of finishing up the development of 3 mini parks. These 3 mini parks were funded by ARPA funding. They're projected to be completed in the next couple months. The picture here we're taking about 2 to 3 weeks ago, so we're getting close to wrapping up these parks. Once the weather gets a little warmer, we'll get our poured-in-place rubber under the playgrounds, get our signs installed, and finish some concrete work. So this one is Eagle Valley, which is at the top of Roosevelt. Westbrook Park is out in Westbrook subdivision off Sitepool Road. And English Ridge is also moving along pretty well. English Ridge is out in English Ridge subdivision off of the Southwest Arterial by Portson Construction. Another project we completed last year was replacing the Jefferson Park retaining wall. The wall was definitely having some issues and beginning to fail. So we replaced all new wall. It is a smooth face wall. So there is opportunities in the future possibly to do some art. The chain link fence was very rusty. That's all been replaced. New stairs have been added, and a sign's going to go in here in the next. A new sign's going to go in here in the next couple weeks. We added some additional chain link fencing, and we might have some other work going on this summer in that park. This was also ARPA funded. Floor pickleball volleyball courts. Last year, these were kind of halfway. We had it paid, but we didn't have the surfacing done, the color coat done. We were able to get the coating done in the spring and get this project. So we now have 6 combination volleyball, pickleball courts. These courts are designed with specific net posts where the net can be easily lowered and raised to lower quickly to play pickleball or raise quickly for our volleyball leagues weeknights during the week. We were also designated Tree City USA again for 2024. And then I wanted to highlight our branching out grant. A lot of you have probably met Lorana. We were able to hire Lorana Snyder as our environmental justice tree coordinator. She's doing an amazing job. We worked with Gina in the sustainability department on this initiative, as well as many other city members to get this grant. And Lorana's doing a great job. We need to up our numbers, but that's about a $1.5 million grant to plant over 5,000 mile of trees. We call it a mile of trees by the end of 2029. Our kickoff, we planted 46 trees last fall. Lorana didn't start till July, so we kind of kicked it in high gear, and we wanted to have a kickoff ceremony. So there's some city staff in this photo here that helped us on that kickoff day down in the Bee Branch Detention Basin. We also partnered with AmeriCorps. They were coming through town. Their NCCC group was coming through town, and we planted 13 trees in the North End neighborhood area around Comiskey and kind of out by the point in those areas. So that was fun to have them come out. We taught them how to plant trees. They had a really good time. And we couldn't do a lot of this, obviously, without our partnership with Dubuque Trees Forever. So we really appreciate Dubuque Trees Forever helping us, not only with this project, but they're also working on an Arbor Day celebration this year at the Arboretum. So they're partnering with the Arboretum to get some trees planted out there. They've been planting trees at the golf course, and we're also working to get some trees planted in some other places of the city outside of the grant requirement areas. So very grateful to have them as a partner. As Marie mentioned, last week we kicked off our Parks and Rec Comprehensive Master Plan. So this has an amazing kickoff so far. We had 2 public inputs last week, meetings in the evenings. We got a lot of feedback. So this is a plug. You can go online. There's a complete website set up for our comp plan under yourstorydubuque.com. There's an interactive map, a lot of different things you can do once you get in that website. You can provide your input. And we're going to be taking engagement all the way through August. So we're going to be gathering you're going to see us in a lot of places and spaces. Our consultant will be back a couple more times to do some more engagement events, but we're going to be doing a lot of these events in-house. So you'll see us around quite a bit, trying to get as much input as we can so we can create this great plan. And hopefully we can get it completed by January of next year. Another project that's coming up right now, we're in the middle of, hopefully here in the next couple of weeks, we'll be replacing the playground at Wallou. This playground was vandalized and half of it burnt about 3 or 4 years ago. So we've been working to get the funding and then put in a brand new play system. So system's been ordered. That's what you see there is what's going to be put out there at that park. So I'm excited to get that project completed here this spring. Another project that's coming up is South Point Subdivision Park. There's a development agreement that the developer must develop the park. So it's first that we've had in our system. Typically, the city builds the park. Here, we're asking or the development agreement says that the developer will build a park. They are planning on building this park this summer. And you'll see in our CIPs later, there is a reimbursement that the developer will get from the city. Another project coming this year is Rustic Point Subdivision Park. So we're currently in the process of getting public engagement and then working on some concept developments, which we'll bring to you in the next month here, or maybe 2 months. We did have our public on-site public engagement meeting last weekend. We had a really good turnout, so that went really well. So now our consultant's working to come up with some concepts based on that public input. This is the same process we did for our 3 mini parks about this time last year. Comiskey Park, Phase 2, continues to move along. This plan pretty much mimics the original master plan. The plan is to add a parking lot, 2 basketball courts, and some more shelters and picnic areas. It will eliminate the parking lot that's next to the building now and put a bigger 53-stall parking lot behind the building. There's also some natives involved in this, and we're trying to get as much as a big green space as we can. As we know, Dubuque's not flat, and most of our parks aren't flat, so really trying to keep as much green space at Comiskey so we can hold events, hold sporting events there as well, and then that way still provide the amenities of the splash pad and have adequate parking, but also have playgrounds and picnic areas and places for people to recreate. So that is hope to be completed in 2027. So that's going to be a process. We're finalizing plans and specs right now, and we're going to continue the process to meet our grant requirements. Moving on to recommended improvement level packages, there's 2. The first one is for a full-time maintenance technician for the B branch. So this position is funded by stormwater fees. The net cost of this position is $57,000, where the initial cost is $82,000. What we have done is we've pulled some savings from temporary positions that we haven't been able to fill. So the $4,000 and the $20,000 you see are current temporary positions within the Park Division budget that we're gonna take that money and we're gonna put it towards hiring this full-time person for the B branch. So this will add 1 FTE to our department. So if approved, we're gonna be very grateful and very thankful for that. The other package is for an equipment trailer for our division. We learned that with our mini excavator that we purchased, which we've been doing a lot of work with, we don't have a trailer to adequately haul it. Public Works has been grateful enough to loan us their trailer when they can, but obviously, you know, they have water main breaks and things going on too. So this is to purchase a trailer for our mini excavator, but can also be used to haul our skid steers and other equipment around. So it's an additional trailer to our fleet. Okay, so moving on to capital improvement projects. So as I mentioned, we're working on our comprehensive master plan. There's currently $400,000 in fiscal year 25 budget. We're requesting an additional $50,000 just to make sure that we do it right. As I mentioned, I think we've never had a plan done for the Parks and Rec Department, so we want to make sure that this plan is done correctly and that it's comprehensive and it's very complex that we're doing. It's not just a Parks Master Plan. We're doing We're looking at our recreation division, we're looking at our natural resources, we're looking at staffing levels, we're looking at deferred maintenance, because we know deferred maintenance is an issue. So we want to make sure that the plan is as comprehensive as it can be, so we're requesting an additional $50,000 if we need it. The Reimagine Comiskey, so the $1.697 million, this is a match to the federal grant that we've been awarded, our Outdoor Recreation Legacy Program grant. So this is a one-to-one match. So we'll be almost about a $4 million project for Phase 2 of Comiskey. Rustic Point Park Development, as I mentioned in the earlier slide, we're in the process of working with the consultant to come up with design. This is the funding to build the park. South Point Park Development, this is what I mentioned earlier. We have a development agreement with the developer, and the city's required to provide $200,000, up to $200,000 in match money for expenses to build the park. We also have some money for doing some native plantings out in our industrial centers. Some funding we're requesting for the Washington Community Gateway, which will also tie into the 14th Street overpass. And then funding for ash tree and removal and tree replacement. This funding is mainly for stump removal. Per new requirements, we're finding that there's a lot of sidewalks that need to be replaced behind trees. So we've been working with the engineering department. We provide the funding to have them contract out the stump removals, and then they have the sidewalk replaced. Lastly is my performance measures. I wanted to kind of quickly point out again our goal for our branching out Dubuque grant is a mile of trees. We're hoping to ramp up things in this year and next year. We've got, I think, a couple hundred going in about 2 weeks. And then Lorena's working hard to continue to up that number as much as we can in the fall and continue to climb so we can get to that number. And with that, I'd like to reiterate what Marie said earlier. I truly do have a dedicated, very skilled staff, and I appreciate all of them that are available to help. And our temporaries, we have a lot of temporary staffs that come back year after year. They love what they do. They love to come back. So we appreciate them as well. But I couldn't do my job without all my staff. So I really appreciate them. So thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much, Steve. Well, first, we are on a public hearing to discuss the Parks Department fiscal year 26 budget. So do we have any public input on the Parks Department budget this evening? And just remember, name and address for the record, please.
Hi, I'm Jean McDonald. I live at 3120 Eagle Point Park and recently wrote a letter to the editor I hope you all had a chance to see. I also personally sent you all a letter last May. Eagle Point Park should be a capital improvement plan. You have a gem in the city that is in the biggest disrepair I have seen in years, and I've lived there for over 60 years. I don't know how many of you have been there recently, but the trees, there's no upkeep of stumps and logs that are just littered everywhere. And when they fall, they're just pushed off over to the side, whether it's a sidewalk or down the hill. It's disgusting. I am really disappointed to see that we don't have a budget to take a gem and get it back up to what its original beauty should be. And I recently sent an email to Chris Lester, the director of the water department, and I said, why is that water tower still standing there? And how long has it been out of service? 5 years. Well, why is it still there? It's unsightly, it's an eyesore. Well, there's a small group of people that feel it has historical relevance. I did not get the names of who those people are, and I would ask that maybe you try to find out why that water tower is still standing, rusting in that park. And, you know, seeing the signs that come up about proposed projects, I went to Carnegie Stout over 5 years ago to see what the prairie would look like at Eagle Point. what was promised was not delivered. I understand either the group that was hired either went out of business or quit, but a prairie has to be maintained, and it can't be maintained when there's trees down in it, leaves that are put over it. Ironically, they just came up and cut across the street from my house, but I don't know what's going to happen in the park. So I guess my big aha is, what is the plan for this gem that you have on this bluff? And I will say that I couldn't get this in my letter to the editor because it limited me to 250 words. But I would like to give a shout out to Chris, the young man who is in charge of that park. He is no match for what that park needs, and he is frustrated. He's, if we get a windstorm up there, they're behind 3 days just picking up branches. And it's a big piece of property. So I really hope that something can be done to bring that park back to its glory that it should be for all the citizens. And if you saw all the license plates up there, people that come from all over the country. So I thank you in advance for any consideration you can do to get that park back in shape.
Thank you, Jean, for your comments. Any others this evening?
Hello, my name is Sue Dillon, and I share the concerns of the previous speaker. That park has been a big part of my whole life. I grew up in that neighborhood, spent my summers in the park playing tennis, and it really breaks my heart to see the condition it's in, and it's continuing to deteriorate every year. We play cards twice a month, and we try to get the Shiras Memorial. It's on a weekday, and it's just a beautiful spot, but you need to go up there and look at the ceiling. The ceiling is crumbling. When you go and sit in there, you have to clean off the table and the benches because all of the plaster or stucco, whatever it is, is crumbling, and the ceiling is just black. We had a family memorial service at the old log cabin, and when we got there, it was filthy. We had to go and get cleaning supplies, brooms, we didn't even want to put food in that structure. It was so dirty. I share the concerns about the prairie. I can understand why some of these areas that are so hilly are difficult to maintain, but the parts that are near the road, to my way of thinking, should look maintained. And also something that I've noticed, there used to be beautiful flower beds all along the Riverwalk overlooking the dam, and there's nothing now. And I realize that budget is a problem and personnel is a problem, but there are 300 volunteers at the Arboretum taking care of the flower gardens there. And I would volunteer in a minute to do that. So maybe you could consider putting that out there for the public. I think that Dubuque people, especially people who grew up here, really have a strong feeling for this park. And it's really deteriorating, and I hope if you haven't gone to see it for yourselves that you do it and make an effort. The new parks are wonderful, but not at the expense of, like this woman said, this gem. So, thank you.
So can you give us your address real quick, please?
Excuse me?
Your address real quick.
My address?
Your address, yeah.
3057 Westmore.
All right, thank you very much. And thanks, Sue, for your comments.
Yeah, I'm John Dolter, 2111 Orchard Drive. My property backs up to Eagle Point Park, and the lane that goes to Rob McDonald's house behind my house. It's a mess. Tree fell down there 5 years ago. I asked the city to remove it. They wouldn't do it. I had to have a friend of mine with his backhoe push it into the woods because I personally mow Eagle Point Park's property there to keep it looking nice. I tried to maintain that. I had somebody turn me in for for trying to maintain it by just cutting down the limbs and throwing them farther down in the forest. But I don't think that should be a problem. You know, if I'm going to do that work for free, you should be happy I'm doing it. And also about the prairie up here that I heard these mentioned. Last year I sold my motorhome to a lady from Kansas, and her funds weren't coming through. So I said I'd take her for a ride through Eagle Point Park. And she goes, "What is that?" referring to the prairie areas. She goes, "I'm from Manhattan, Kansas. I know what a prairie is. That's not a prairie and never will be. It's in a forest." And that's all I have to say.
All right.
But I would be willing, and why don't you get, just like the lady said, more community involvement. I would personally volunteer to help clear them forests. Do you know how much firewood's laying on the ground up there that people would gladly remove for you? And maybe if you had maybe a class, get them certified to remove this and sign a waiver so they could go in there with their chainsaws and say what they can and cannot do. But that would clean up. I drive up Shiras every day. And Eagle Point Park property, north of the Ham House, before the entrance, is a shambles. And the back road going into the park, it's a shambles. And then you bought another 11 acres from Anthony's, and that just sits vacant up there. And I talked to Wally Warnham one time, and he said they were planning a walking path, because I don't think a lot of people realize that Eagle Point Park goes almost all the way to Four Mountains along that bluff. You know, more of the park is unused than is used. So that's all I have to say.
All right, well, thank you, John, for your comments. Please. And if there are more people that would like to come up, feel free to just come and stand right there, and then we can just keep everybody rolling through.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kelly Langling. I live at 1165 Arrowhead Drive. And like has been mentioned, Eagle Point Park is truly a Dubuque treasure. And I had an experience last year. I had a party planned for my mother's 80th birthday, and I went up the day before to check out the pavilion, and it was an absolute disgrace. There was weeds growing everywhere, mud. It was in disrepair. I decided not to use the property. I was embarrassed to take my family up there for this event. I was also up there and I was looking at other pavilions. The Tri-State View, all around the Tri-State View pavilion was all mud. I wouldn't even want to walk and use it because it was just a mess. And I applaud all of your efforts and your budget considerations for new parks where the population is moving in the city, but Eagle Point Park, like I said, is a treasure and should really be considered and taken back to its original grandeur. I mean, there's nothing like it. The views, the pavilion properties and architecture, it is stunning. When I did make my call to the city last year after I discovered the pavilions in disarray, they told me we're short-staffed. We also are growing the prairie grass. So I got thinking, I'm a master gardener, and I know many other master gardeners in the city of Dubuque. I don't want to speak on behalf of the master gardeners, but I do know many of them would be more than happy to volunteer and put some efforts forth to bring back Eagle Point Park. And I'm sure to get things back and moving in the right direction, I'm thinking maybe there would be some local landscapers, people involved that way in the community that might for a year say, hey, we'll do some plantings, we'll get it back moving in the right direction, and maybe we can put a sign up that says, you know, Riverfront Flower Bed, sponsored by Wagner Nursery or Steve's Ace or whoever it is. But the best idea would be to give some of those dollars, reallocate them to Eagle Point Park. Thank you for your consideration, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kelly, for your comments.
Hi, my name is Al Pline. I'm from 334 Angela Jean Circle in Piasta. I came because I saw the letter to the editor in the paper. I don't live in the area anymore, but I grew up in the Point area. And I just, sitting through watching your budget presentation, it's great about all the new parks and everything that's going on, but I'm not going to go over what everyone else said again or repeat it, but I find it ironic that the Eagle, which is the entrance to the park, which is the flagship park of the city, is highlighted on your agenda there tonight, and it appears that's where all the complaints are from, and it's just not being taken care of. But I don't have any exact specifics because I didn't get to go through there this year, but I did last year. But thanks for your
All
time.
right, thank you, Al, for your comments.
Yeah, I'm Tom Fondell from 2570 Cyrus Avenue. I live right across from the park entrance. Now, when I backed out of my driveway, the maintenance workers were cleaning up around the building there, and he was blowing the leaves and everything all over. And I said, who's blowing it to the street? And I says, what are you doing? He says, well, I'm blowing everything to the street. And I says, now, who told you to do that? He says, oh, my guy in charge. And I says, no, there is a little respect around here. And that park isn't being taken care of. The trees all over. It just pushed to the side. I'd like it cleaned up. If you just take a ride up in there, I'm sure you'd agree with me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John, for your comments.
Good evening. My name is Karen Merkuzik. I live at 14248 Augusta Court. So I'm actually living in the county. So I'm a visitor to your city parks, okay? But we spend a lot of time in Eagle Point Park. As a matter of fact, 57 years ago was where I held my first date with my husband. So we've been there a long time, and we go there weekly, sometimes twice a day. We go there through the winter and through the summer, so we have had a lot of opportunity to see the parks. We've rented pavilions over the years, and we're very dissatisfied with what we see as happening to the park. You know, I just did a simple Google about prairie. And it tells us that you have to have a minimum of 6 hours worth of sunlight for that prairie grass to be really healthy and really sustain itself. And there's areas up there that is total shade all day. So I'm not sure why it was laid out the way it was, but what I've noticed is that through the primary entrance into the park, that's very glaring. You come up around the first corner, and it just looks very tattered, very unmanaged, it's an eyesore. And I think it's a negative impact. It's a negative first impression of our park for visitors to come. And so I really ask, you know, what are you going to do with it? And it's been signified as a national treasure and a historical national item for our city, our county, our state. I'm sure there's funding that's been made available to us. And I really question, you know, what funding have we had? What funding, what's been utilized for our park? This is the only park in our city that we're charging fees for. And I'm wondering how much of that, even those small fees, well, which is pavilions, those aren't small, but the daily fees that you take in, what are those utilized for? Are they utilized for other parks? Are they taken somewhere else? Are they, you know, and my questions are not rhetorical. You know, the citizens would like to hear, you know, county members would like to hear. I'd like to understand it because it has just year over year declined. And, you know, something as small as it's not small, the restrooms. We looked for 2 or 3 years that we looked at a portable facility there in front of one of our restrooms. But yet I don't see any updates being made progressively, you know, through those restrooms across the park. You know, is it a break and fixes fail type system that you have that you got to first look for capital at that point? You know, so there's just a lot of concerns about the budgeting, about what's happening. And I think what was most glaring tonight about the presentation that I seen about our parks is Eagle Point Park was mentioned very, very little. And I noticed that you have the picture there of the eagle there in the entrance, and you know, it rarely looks like that. And if it does, it might be at the very end of our tail end of our year. So I'm really wondering, how do you prioritize the planting? You know, where's that focus at? You know, I think I know where the focus is at. I've seen other very beautiful pictures here that you've displayed. But, you know, we'd like to see us do better. And I think our county likes to see us do better. And I think we can do better, especially with the input from our citizens and our help. So thank you for your time. I do appreciate you listening tonight.
Thank you, Karen, for your comments.
Mary Kloss, 1605 Lincoln. I've lived in the Point area all my life, and I love Eagle Point Park. Just as the speaker before me said, that is a beautiful picture, but it very seldom looks like that. I know last year it looked at fall time, yeah, it was beautiful then, but the park was ready to close. The reason I got up to speak is last time I was here when we went through this, I just sat in the audience, and my daughter was very disappointed that I didn't get up and talk. I'm not a great speaker, but here I am. You see flowers all around the city of Dubuque. On every lamppost, you'll see these hanging flowers. And there's hardly anything in the park. When you go up in the park, the first turn you make, we have 4 pedestals that used to have plants on them. There haven't been plants on there for at least 3-4 years. So I'd like to see more flowers. And like they said, to get the community involved. I think that would really help. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary, for your comments.
My name's Lynn LeBlanc. I live at 2181 Orchard Drive. I've lived out at the Point my whole life. I think my ancestors go back to the late 1800s in that end of town, so I know it very well. Eagle Point Park is a park that I've used my entire life, and I use it to this day with my grandkids. My husband and I walk through it probably 3 or 4 times a week, winter and summer. You really want to see the park. I drive through it, but you should get out and walk to some of these areas and really get a feel for how they're looking. And we do love the park, and we appreciate everything that has been done there, but we want to see it to continue to get better. I ride my bike a lot, and I'm on the B Branch a lot, and it's beautiful. But that just how stark that is compared to Eagle Point really shines through. The part of the B Branch that goes from 16th Street to Garfield, it's not used that much, and it looks fabulous. And then you go to Eagle Point, that's used a lot, and it doesn't look so good. So I appreciate your listening to our comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn, for your comments.
Hi, Willie Meyer, 1856 Romberg. So I live in the Point area as well. I walk through the park, Eagle Point Park, quite a bit. I walk B Branch area. I walk a lot of different places. I like to do a lot of walking. And due to the fact that it's a budget meeting, I think that something should be done as far as prioritizing where our monies are going, because like it's been mentioned, I'm not going to keep beating a dead horse. We all know what Eagle Point Park looks like. But you walk through the B Branch area and it's fantastic. It's kept up wonderful. What's going on at Comiskey and some of these other parks are great. But it's been said before, we have a gem and we're just letting it go. And that just doesn't seem right. Due to the fact that this is a budget meeting, maybe we should try to focus something more. And like other people have said, possibly we could get community involvement that wouldn't even cost that much. Thank you.
Thank you, Willie, for your comments.
Good evening. My name is Rob McDonald. I reside at 3399 Eagle Point Drive. I'd like to thank the park staff behind me. I feel bad for them because they're not getting the support from the city. Everybody knows how good that park is and how important it is, and they're not getting the support. It's, my sister referred to it as a gem. It is the crown jewel of our park system. And I thought, well, let's put it in perspective as something maybe people from the city will understand. The rental inspection program. We have landlords all across Dubuque. They get inspected. We have great landlords. There's a couple in the audience. And there's some that need a push. Some need a kick. Well, if you're the landlords of our parks, Eagle Point Park, dead trees, there's tires. There's dumped tires on the back entrance of the park. I've been there a long time. And, I don't think landlords get a budget cycle. They don't get I don't have the money. Too bad, fix it. Or you're on the naughty list. Okay, well, guess what? Eagle Point's on the naughty list. You've heard it all. It's not a new problem. It's an old problem. My sister had Mayor Buell up there. He hasn't been around a long time. And it seems like we do the parks, and then we forget about the parks. Because a couple of years ago, A.Y. McDonald Park, which was named after my great-great-grandfather, and we actually paid a large sum from our company to have it named after him, to honor him. I had people calling me because they think it's our park. And they said, that place is terrible. I said, I know. I had a friend who came up and said, I'm organizing a group of women, we're gonna go clean it up. Because I was getting pretty close to talking to the city manager. It's like, can we put a hood over our name until we get something fixed? I don't want to be associated. Now, it got fixed up, but it went way too far. I don't think anybody here is asking for a multi-million-dollar fix. It probably needs it, but nobody's asking for that. We want it cleaned up and then maintain it. You don't need a consultant to tell you that. All the consultants are right here. And people care. On the Dubuque website, interesting, it said the idea for Eagle Point Park was conceived by city leaders in 1907 when Charles Robinson, a noted Eastern park specialist, visited Dubuque. After touring scenic locations in the city, Robinson commented, I have never seen a place where the Almighty has done more and mankind less than Dubuque. It's terrible what this mankind is doing to that park. And I'm looking at the people who need to fix it. And to also put it in perspective for the people I'm speaking to, it will be, if I was running for council, that'd be the cover of my webpage. It's a shame. So please fix it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob, for your comments. Anybody else? Nobody here. Anybody virtually?
No written input.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay. Back to us for discussion then. So let's kick it off with a discussion about Eagle Point Park. I think it's the one thing people really like to talk about. So I guess the question would be, Steve, Marie, whoever wants to come up, because I think would be useful right now in this moment in talking about since we are talking about the budget and talking about everything that goes into it, is let's just have an open and honest conversation about Eagle Point, and as much as we can, at least without the paper or the spreadsheets in front of us, talk a little bit about what the plans have been, what has been done, how does maintenance work. In general, let's start the discussion, and then we'll kind of see where we go from there. I'm sure the council members will have some specific questions too. And I do want to make sure that I also, just to remind us, we're going to talk about Eagle Point Park for a while, but then let's make sure that we shift and talk about some of these other things too, because you've got a lot going on as a department.
One of the pieces of the budget document is all the things that get cut or are not recommended. So one can look at not just this year's, but if you go back numerous years, and actually on each CIP that's in there, there's a box that most people don't look at. And you don't see the ones that aren't funded, but we fill in, like this started in this particular year. So we have gotten to the point, very honestly, with some of it, there's enough different projects that don't get funded. Why make another sheet and do all the research when, you can't really have it? Because there's just not enough funds, and you all know what that is. You know the challenges we've had over the last number of years of the different things that happen. When it comes to the new ones, like the ones this evening, those are ones that you all approved a development agreement that had certain parameters in it, and it just so happens that we have a couple that the parameters are happening during the exactly same time. And so that's another piece of this. When it comes to the operating budget, we have done, as you all know, we've added more parks, but we haven't added the people. if you really look back historically, because we did in 2015 a Parks Division study, we have less staff members now than the city had in the parks in 1980. And if you think about the resources that have been added, one of the things that we've been very blessed with is there is equipment purchases that help us to become more efficient. There's different ways of doing things. There's technologies. And so we've tried to use, to the best of our ability, all those different tools to try to be able to do it without adding a whole lot of different people. But at some point in time, it does come where you don't have necessarily the resources to be able to do that. So Eagle Point has its own pieces that go along with it because it is a very special and a very specific place. Now, I would say that we do have, like with the three Caldwell buildings currently, we were funded with, we took city money and then we got a private grant to be able to do a historic structures assessment. That does not cover the Shiris. That covers the three that as you come in, that you see that are those historic structures. And within that report, within the next council meeting or two, you'll actually have that on your agenda that outlines what are the critical things that need to be done with those structures. And then we have the opportunity to apply for another grant, which would have to have match, which for all those present, if you value those facilities, if we go for that grant, it's 2 to 1. 1 grant to 2 private dollars. And so that will be an opportunity for people to be able to, you know, if you value that as a community resource. And one of the things with this grant is it can't just be matched with the city CIP. It really has to be upswell of your public to do that. So there is one of the things that we've been working on as a part of it. As the different individuals have talked, it's not, so in the beginning, I kicked this off with how proud that everyone that works here is. What I can tell you is that it hurts every single one of us when we know we're not doing the job that we want to do, but we do the best we can with the resources we have. So if you pulled up every different staff member that works in all these places, they could tell you all the things they're not getting to very easily and would love to do it. It's just that there's only so much time, so one prioritizes what those are. Sometimes it means that we have to come to you to find money. So in other words, if there's a porta potty sitting there, that means that we have a water line issue. We're assessing what that water line is, and sometimes we have to come back to you another year to request funding before we can actually take care of that. So sometimes our cycles, sometimes we're able to like say, well, now we won't fund this, we had money for this, we need to use this. So quite often we're sending memos to the city manager saying, we're going to have to steal money from something that was even funded in order to address it if it can't wait. Sometimes it needs to wait so that we can put the request in.
You know, and maybe it'll help if I ask some specific questions too, and then I'm going to let the other council members ask some too, because I think that might help the discussion move along a little bit. Maybe to address some of the specific things that we heard tonight, for example, which are concerns that we have heard. You know, one of the priorities that we actually created as a council back in August is a park. I'm forgetting the phrasing. I want to get it right, so I don't want to say it out loud unless I've got it right here. One of the priorities is parks maintenance and refresh action plan is one of the things that we talked about. And I remember that discussion was a lot of it did focus on Eagle Point Park. There's a couple spots in town that people talk about a lot. Eagle Point Park, the beds on Grandview come up a lot because they're different than they used to be. And then just in general, we hear about flowers a lot, you know, like thinking about where to beautify things and have those flowers that are going to be in the space. But Eagle Point is definitely one of the centerpieces of that conversation. So things like, I'm going to say these things are, I don't want to use the word easy, but it's like the stuff that you notice the most is what I mean. So like the trees being down. I don't want to talk about the prairie yet because I think that's a specific thing, but the trees being down and the maintenance in general of the natural environment. I mean, what are some of the challenges that we have with that, given the current resources and current financial and personnel resources that we have.
Yeah, Steve Faisal, Park Division Manager. So we have a tree crew of 3 people. And that's very hard to manage a 30 square mile area, city limits, you know. So we've also been struggling. Typically, we hire 2 temporaries in the summer. We've been struggling to fill those positions as well. The reason for that is, and we're doing some strategic looking at those positions, but most of the vehicles that are operated by forestry staff require a CDL. So a lot of times we require our summer help to have a CDL. And so it's hard to find those. We used to have a very dedicated group of retirees that would come back year after year. We had 70-plus-year-old guys doing tree work. I mean, they're amazing, amazing staff. Last year was a horrible storm year. I mean, we had 3 storms back-to-back just in the month of June. And so for our tree crew, it's really about, as we talked in my slide, public safety is the first thing. We got to get streets opened. We got to get roads opened. We got to get, we got to prioritize what trees are getting, removed in a timely manner. And in the summertime, it's hard to backfill additional staff with our forestry staff because we're still trying to keep our parks open, keep them maintained. We have rentals going on, all those things. Climate change is definitely affecting us. I mean, there's a lot of deadfall in Eagle Point Park that's happened in the last 7 to 10 years. And a lot of times, we show up, we clear the trail, we push it off to the side because we got to get to the next job. And sometimes that could take 3 weeks. And that's, in the middle of that, we're still working on our morass borer program. We're still trying to prune trees. And then the next storm comes. So it's a challenge with our tree crews because we're very limited on staff, to be honest. Quickly, I would like to say, we do have some funding for Eagle Point. So there's things that are going on in the background that the public might not necessarily know about. We have a little bit of funding to work on the Shiras. We just had someone up there looking at it last week. We have a little bit of funding to do some work on the log cabin. I'm working with someone to come up and look at that. These structures are historic, so we have to and we're on the National Historic Register. We have to make sure we're following policies, procedures, hiring the right people to do the job. Some of the tasks that our staff's taken on in the last couple of years, to save money, we renovated 2 restrooms up there in-house with our operating budget. We didn't use capital funds. We used our operating budget, the band shell restrooms, and the restrooms in the middle of the park by our park shop. Staff renovated those. Dude, I have amazingly skilled staff. They did a great job, So there are projects coming. So we do have some funding for Eagle Point, but we've also lost some funding for Eagle Point. Some of our other recent projects in the last 6 years, we put a roof on the bridge complex. We put a roof on the Indian Room. We did a partial water line project from near the band shell to get the leaks fixed. So there is some funding that we've had that we're trying to get ramped up, but
Okay.
yeah, so hopefully that answers your question.
It did.
As
It
for
did.
part.
The trees part especially, for the main question I asked. So as we continue the discussion, just a couple of thoughts from me to kind of help center us a little bit. I think one of the things is we have a lot of detail about identifying what the problem is, and I think there's some specific areas of that problem that I've heard tonight, and people can disagree with me if you want, but the trees and the flowers and the natural environment. You mentioned facilities, a couple of things there. The prairie, I think we need to talk about some more. And then just the people power, the ability to have people to do this work, which obviously is a money question, but I also heard the word volunteer a lot. So I want to make sure we cover some of those things. So just to center us as we continue this discussion, but I'll open it up for council members to jump in. Mr. Resnick.
Mr. Mayor?
Sorry, Ms. Roussel. I'm going to go Resnick first, and then I'll go to you, okay?
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you for those explanations, and it is a very big job with a lot of people, and you're doing very, very good work. When I first moved to Dubuque, I was really into the history, and for a very long time, Eagle Point Park was the #1 Dubuque attraction. We've got a lot going on now, but for a very long time, people have loved that park, and almost everyone who came up there today said, we'd like to be part of the solution, which I appreciated very much. We almost have a Friends of Eagle Point Park group started right now that maybe could be associated with our parking commission, Park and Rec Commission. But so I think there's a lot of positive things we're hearing about tonight. I, like the mayor, would love to have some specific answers to some questions that would come up, and just an overall reaction, maybe. Could I? There were a lot of things that were said tonight about the condition of Eagle Point Park. Now, my wife and I are up there almost every week riding a bike, and it goes things go by pretty fast when you're on a bike. So I don't get that same kind of, people walking and people in there every day. I do see a lot of people visiting Dubuque, those license plates from lots of different places, and they love the view. So, I mean, it is still a big attraction for a lot of people who love that natural look and the grandeur. I often think also when I'm riding past that, the water tower, it's like, why is this here? And how would we get it down? Who would have the budget for that and that type of thing? So if you wouldn't mind, could you just maybe react to a couple top line things that you might have heard tonight that, well, they mentioned this and we do have a plan for that, or we're waiting for the parks plan to really get specific, or if you wouldn't mind.
So one of the, because as you pointed, the city council said park maintenance and refresh action plan. So there's a very specific component of the master plan that is relative to that. So last week when the consultants were here, they went to every single park and went through every single park, and Eagle Point being one of them. They spent, several hours there, didn't they? And they spent it with the staff. So the staff took them around. So the people that they were talking about were with them as they were notating all these things. Now, I don't have what their report is, so, I can't tell you what that is. I can tell you that that was a very specific component. When we hired them, we said, we need a report. We also asked them to be able to provide us a report prior to your goal setting, because although, like Steve said, January is when it's supposed to be done, we knew you would want, prior to your goal setting, some sort of an update of what are preliminary findings, what are things that they can share at this point in time, even though we wouldn't be totally complete. And even that would be usually your August, and our public input completes in that August timeframe. So we want to be kind of a little bit careful, but we wanted to be able to provide that information to you, as well as they'll be providing it to us, in order to be able to really start thinking about what can happen. So we've taken to heart that piece of it, because anytime you prioritize these sorts of things, it's like, how's the best way to do that? And sometimes the best way is, we listen to the people, which that's the engagement part. So tonight, people are engaging. We have people around the community that will be engaging within this continued conversation through August. And then obviously listening to the staff and bringing all that together as for Eagle Point, but also for all the other ones as well. Because I do believe that there will be things that come out, even though we're talking about Eagle Point, that are about other ones or common themes throughout the system potentially, that it means it's more of a systemic problem or something we need to address. So just as a beginner, and then I'll let Steve kind of go from there.
Thanks, Marie. Yeah, I mean, we recognize the issues that we have. I'm fully aware, and one of the reasons I present every year a budget presentation is, and I say it at the beginning of every presentation, we're not just parks. And the issue is, over the years, we've got 4 roundabouts now. Who does the maintenance? Parks. We have the B branch now. Who does the maintenance? Parks. Highway corridors, industrial centers. And that's why I highlight those, because we have 21 full-time staff that manage 50-plus parks, plus all that other stuff I talk about in my presentation, trees, flowers, all that stuff. And so it's a lot of work for my staff, and we recognize, and Chris does amazing work. Chris Leahy is our full-time maintenance worker up at the park, and I appreciate the compliment, so thank you for that. Chris does the best he can with what he has, and and we know there's issues up there. I acknowledge that. We're doing the best we can, and that's why, like I wanted to mention, there are some projects that we're starting to work on related to structures, but we also need to start looking at, do we need to hire a tree contractor to come in and do some work on the edges along the trails? What is the next step for a prairie? It should be burned. We haven't burned it yet. So, but we don't have any certified staff to burn, so we have to hire someone to burn. So there's a lot of logistics that go behind a lot of that stuff. But I can say I'm fully aware, our staff's aware, and we're doing the best we can with what we have.
Great, well, thank you very much for those results and your comments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Rousseau.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, yeah,
Mr.
Mike.
Mayor,
Go ahead. Yep.
Mike Van Milligan, City Manager.
Yep, go for it.
I appreciate all the input tonight, and I love the fact that besides identifying what the issues are, and obviously there are issues, but there was suggestions of how to deal with those issues. And it makes me think of some of the other situations throughout our community. So the Dubuque Arboretum, that's on city property, but it's a not-for-profit, 100% run by volunteers. They raise the money, they do the volunteer maintenance, and of course, it's a beautiful and fabulous place. And then I think about Mines of Spain. So there's the E.B. Lyons section of Mines of Spain, which is only about, I think it's about 30 acres, but the city owns that part, the E.B. Lyons section. And there's a group called the Friends of the Mines of Spain. Once again, it's a non-for-profit group, and they do a lot of the fundraising to make that as nice a place as it is. As a matter of fact, they raised several $1 million to build that beautiful, beautiful new building that's out there and is well used. And then I think about Four Mounds. So Four Mounds is a city park, but it's completely run by a not-for-profit, the Four Mounds Foundation. And they maintain all the beautiful homes out there. They do all the programming out there where they have summer camps and all kinds of wonderful things that happen. And while I don't know if any one of those individually is a model for Eagle Point Park, I think based on what some of the speakers said, I think there's some great potential there. The potential for a not-for-profit, the Friends of Eagle Point Park, as Councilmember Resnick mentioned. And, it could be a combination of what happens out at the Arboretum, where volunteers come out and help maintain, or what happens at the Mines of Spain, where people actually raise money and then specific projects happen, maintenance and otherwise. And I don't think in any way that's the city saying, well, it's not our responsibility. The city does dedicate staff, does dedicate capital resources, but I don't think there's any argument that it's not enough. And so maybe coming out of the some of the suggestions from the people in the audience that talked about, hey, let's all pitch in to make this better. Maybe there is a not-for-profit to come out of this that in 3 years, Eagle Point Park is the apple of everybody's eyes because everybody put their shoulder to it and made it happen. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mike. Ms. Rousseau.
Thank you. Well, this is exactly what I had in mind. I know that in addition to budget issues, sometimes citizen action is a great solution. So, for example, many years before I was on council, I knew that the city was unable to plant as many trees as I'd like to see. So I organized Dubuque Trees Forever, and we worked very closely with the city to enhance what they can do to plant trees using volunteers throughout the community, including at Eagle Point Park. And I think that a group such as that, it doesn't have to be large, but an organized and focused group of volunteers are often the best solutions to a problem that's close to home. Surely there are budget considerations that we can look at as well, but I think a citizen action group would be a great solution. And I'd be happy to help anyone get started with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Rousseau. Who's next? Ms. Wethel.
I'll just comment. So I actually serve as the city representative on the Friends of Minds of Spain board, and I've had the privilege to do that. Actually, Councilmember Roussel was kind enough to turn that over to me, and I love it. I once a month get to meet with folks, including Jennifer Tigas, who's chairperson of our Parks and Recs Commission, who is the president of Friends of Minds of Spain. I'm a non-voting member, but I go there and my goal is to show up and on behalf of the city learn what they need from the city and what we can do to assist their goals. And so a lot of that is funding. Some of that is working very closely with Marie on projects that must be done that we need to do our part of. And so it's not as though the city just turns over the keys and says, we're out of here. It's very different than that. And so I believe the city does have a responsibility to take care of Eagle Point. In fact, I will tell you that I was one of the people who first brought it up as an issue at goal setting. I feel very strongly about Eagle Point. I've had a lot of, maybe many of you, that I have emailed with, and I appreciate your input. I think collaborative input is so important, and for those of you who spend so much time there, you are the authorities on what needs to be done, along with our staff, of course. I will say I'm very called to the structures. I'm really looking forward to having the assessment done. It will take tax dollars to fix that. And so as much as we're sitting here and talking about budget, we need to hear from you moving forward what you need. We need to make sure we prioritize it, and we have with our goals and priorities this year. That was a really drawn out discussion, and I don't think any of you were probably there for our goal setting discussion of this topic, but we specifically called out Eagle Point and what we need to do. And I'll share my disappointment that I voiced as well. And so this is not a new topic for this council. This weighs heavy on our concern as it relates to parks. I too am concerned that when we expand our square footage and square mileage of parks, that we must be able to maintain it. That's our responsibility. But I also feel that if there's people in this room who are willing to help us do that with a model such as Friends of Minds of Spain, or something that would more formally create a resource group, I think it would be fantastic. And I also would be very much inclined to help do whatever I could and try and recruit people to walk along with it too. So thank you. I think that's all for now.
Mr. Sprank, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I've heard from, well, first of all, thank you for everybody for coming out tonight because, you know, I know many folks have a lot better things to do than come to a budget hearing on a Wednesday night, but thank you. Your input does matter. I know I've heard it for a number of years, the problems up at the park. It's nothing new. I've gone and I've seen it, I've witnessed it, I've walked it. It is frustrating, and as always, it comes down to a funding thing. But I would have a question for Marie and Steve. If you had a ballpark number, in my brain, I imagine a good $5 million would be spent to get the park up to the standards, to get all the structures, the water lines. That's just the number I have floating around in my brain. I don't know if that's somewhere that you would think is a good number or a safe number or a ballpark number even.
That's our finance department, by the way.
Yeah.
They're the numbers people. That's where that discussion's going.
They're our accountants.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Laura's going to add up the 5-year of the ones that are already in the queue that weren't funded, so she's going to do that.
Great, thank you.
But as a generality to begin with, while she's doing that, we both kind of looked at each other, and it would be more than what you're talking about. Anything that's historic in nature always takes more because it takes more specialty, and that's specialty contractors, also specialty design, and bid specs and all those kinds of things. So anytime you do that, but you do it for the preservation and the passing it along to the future, and preserving that legacy. So thus the reason why when we did the historic structures report, you need to know what it's going to be like and what it's going to take to be able to do that in order to be able to have the right resources and make sure we do it correctly so it goes on to the next generation, because that's what we're about doing.
Another thought that you might want to think about. So I know we've talked about these upcoming projects with these. We've had a lot of public input and development on other parks, and so we kind of lay out the master plan for folks, so folks are aware that, hey, this is what's going to happen. Maybe we need to probably develop one, if there is one that we can look at for Eagle Point, so folks could publicly know, like, oh, and this is the 5-year plan of action, so we can see what's actually happening. And that'd be probably something I think I would like to see, so then everybody knows what's going on with the park in general. So.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that one can do, we're doing this overall master plan, and we will have items for Eagle Point Park, but another step you can do is if you think about what we did with Comiskey. With Comiskey, we said, here's what we have. We want to reimagine it. So your words refresh that you used during your goal-setting session. We want to reimagine that. So what do we imagine and reimagine that to be? What do we value? What do we want to keep? What's important to improve? Maybe what's something that's not there that still goes to the character of what that particular park is. So, like for instance, sometimes people say, well, it doesn't really have a lot of people walk there, but it doesn't really have a walking trail. It doesn't have sidewalks. So a lot of people just walk in the road, which, can be okay as long as it's not busy. So that is one of the possibilities that one could consider if one wants to dig into it a little bit more, so that you really take it in a very comprehensive approach, just like we did Comiskey. And you almost need to have that if you want to try to go for grants and things like that. To my knowledge, the number of grants for these kinds of things are shrinking, particularly historic things. There used to be funding sources. Many of those are, they've either gone away, or you can get $10,000, $15,000. And sometimes that works for a project, but sometimes not enough. 1.7 million is the amount that is currently in the weren't able to be funded.
Let me go around the horn first, and then I'll come back to
It
you.
was related to that, but.
Oh, please, then, go ahead. Yeah, go for it.
Just before we move on the cost, I would like to know and I know you don't have this now, but related to removing the water, water tower. Has that ever been calculated as part of this?
Not from us.
Okay.
It would be the water department. So if Chris
Okay.
Lester's coming up for you, he's the guy to ask as the water department
I already did,
manager.
but
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, but I think, so that would go into his budget rather than your budget. Thank you.
Well, I mean, it can go in anybody's budget, but we've really looked at it as that's their resource that was there. For the longest time, it still had function. A while back, it was like, okay, they did all the things to kind of abandon it. From there, I guess, unless you know more, I have not kept up with, what the plan is for it, or if there is a cost that's already been done or not.
Just a note, we do have the water department budget still coming. Chris was here for something else the other
that's
night, because
right,
we
he
actually had a
was.
regular city
Yeah.
council
Okay.
meeting. We're losing track of meetings at this point. So let's, just a quick time check here. It is 10 to 8. I'd like to complete this part of the conversation by 8 o'clock. We've got a long night ahead of us yet. We've got the recreation department, several other things. That doesn't mean this is over, not by a long shot. But I do think that we need to move along for tonight this is a great discussion, but I do want to make sure that I get to Ms. Farber and Mr. Jones, and then we'll close it out and kind of go from there and talk about anything else we want to talk about parks related. Ms. Farber.
Thank you very much, and I agree with my colleagues and the unique opportunity I think that we have for the Friends of the Eagle Point Park Group, and I would also support that and help in any way. One thing just came to my mind about historic preservation, and especially for the Caldwell buildings and others. There is and there are still historic tax credits from the state of Iowa that we can apply for. So using Heritage Works as your partner in this, you could probably get some applications established, and hopefully there would be some funding there in terms of those tax credits for that rehab for the park. I just wanted to refresh your memory and remind everybody about that. The other question I have, and on the budget itself, and Jennifer, there is a listing of all the fees and seasonal passes, pavilion fees, pet park fees, camping fees, park entrance fees. How are those funds used for the parks? Could you shed some light on that? It's page 17 on the document that I have. Okay.
Jennifer Larson, Chief Financial Officer. So the Parks and Rec Department is part of the overall city budget, general fund budget. So all departments that are in the general fund budget, revenues that they generate just goes into what I would call a pool of funds that funds all general funded.
Okay, because one of the speakers today had asked that question, so it's not specifically if there's 150,000 that is collected from the park fees, it doesn't necessarily go back to the parks or recreation group in particular.
It's not officially designated for Parks and Rec.
Okay, and then I have,
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, please, Mike.
Mike Van Milligan, City Manager. But an important point here is that much more property tax money goes to support the system, the park system, than these fees generate. So while it's true the generated fees go into the general fund, all of that money comes back to the parks, plus much, much, much more through the property tax system. So it all is spent on the parks.
and then one more quick question. What do you think it would take to actually maintain the park on a regular basis? How many full-time employees do you think, or do you guess?
Right now, so we have one full-time staff, and then we hire typically 3 temporaries in the summer, sometimes 4 if we can get that many. It's hard to say, 2 full-time staff plus those additional 3 or 4. And, that's kind of one of the reasons that we have been asking for staff in previous years, because we're aware that we're short, in those areas. And that's what, we also asked for a forestry tech this budget cycle. But it's hard to say. We could do a little digging and look into it, but, if we had 2 full-time skilled people up there, because a lot of time temporaries are, they don't have the skills to do some of the maintenance and the technical stuff. And that's a lot of times why we ask for those full-time staff, because they have the skill set to do that kind of work.
With such a large park, do you have a schedule where you know how many people are there on a regular basis? I guess that's my question, is to find out the frequency of the maintenance that occurs so that the neighbors have an understanding of the attention that is given to the park.
Yeah, our full-time staff works, Monday through Friday, and then we have staff there 7 days a week. Weekends is when our temporary staff are prepping buildings and facilities and restrooms, cleaning restrooms, getting ready for rentals for the weekend. But our season runs from first Saturday in May through the end of October. So if we're fully staffed from May to October, and those temporaries work 40 hours a week as well. So they're kind of like full-time employees because they do work 40 hours. So we could have 4 40-hour-a-week employees working there during our season. If that helps. Yep.
Mr. Jones? Oh,
if I
please,
might.
yeah, please. Mike.
On the other side of that, there are times when we fill in with contractors. So in other words, someone who owns a business that is relative to what we do. So we have, not in this park, but in other parks, like contract mowing. So we have a business that comes in and they do the mowing of a particular park. One of the things we've always looked at is there anyone who also is in some of these other areas that we've been talking about tonight that can do some of that work? So in other words, instead of trying to hire people or whatever, we just use them as needed. on specific things. The challenge for us has been, and Steve can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty darn sure, we just don't have the right kind of commercial contractors within the driving distance that they would come in order to be able to service us. And so when you asked earlier about other things or other possibilities, that is something we've always looked at, but we've just not had the level of contractors. So I came from another city that they had levels of contractors we could bring in for some other services we needed. And so some of the things that were talked about tonight, we don't have those available within our community or within that drive that a contractor would do to be able to service us. That's why we talk about, usually you try and look at either employees or another way you could get the same thing done. And we haven't been able to do that on some of these specific things that were talked about this evening.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Jones.
Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I get the problem. For about the last 40 years, the city's been crawling out of the worst economic hole you can imagine for a municipality. And 40 years seems like a long time, but we're just starting to get all the pieces back in some of our public safety programs and some of our other programs. This is one of 35 such hearings we're having over 7 evenings over the last week and the next several weeks. And each of those departments come with needs and ideas that are worthy. And the dollar pie is finite, and it's getting more and more finite. In fact, it's looking like it might shrink with some legislative actions and some grants being discontinued and all of that. So we've painted ourselves in a bit of a corner with Eagle Point in particular, but with Park Services, because for councils before this one, before the one before that, before the one before that, deferring some maintenance has been a way to keep moving forward. And as the city manager pointed out to us just last week, deferred maintenance is almost worse than debt because it costs you more down the road and causes you some harm. So that's where we're at. We've deferred things to the point that that we have to get on it. That's why in our goal setting last year, the park maintenance plan was rose to the top group, because we recognize that we're behind the 8 ball. I don't think the Prairie has worked. Maybe there's a way to make it work. I think we had a group that was pretty adamant that we shouldn't be using herbicides and pesticides in our lawn management in the parks. That's created some areas that are muddy that used to be grassy because we're not able to help the turf like we used to be able to. And certainly staffing is hurting you badly. So I look forward to get the needs really defined and seeing what that brings us and what the comprehensive plan brings us for parks. And we'll have to work on some funding ways, but I gotta be honest, there's no magic fix. There's no close the fire station, fix the park kind of thing. There's not something out there. We're gonna be looking for it. We're looking pretty hard for it in these 7 evenings of budget hearings to see if there's some money budgeted that could be shifted to something else or that might not need to be spent. And so far, frankly, all we've found is $10,000 more we'd like to spend if we can figure out a way to do it. We haven't found anything that wasn't worthy and important to citizens. And I get that this is important to citizens. It's important to me that we get Eagle Point Park back to the grandeur. We got to get rid of the water tower. We got to figure out what to do with the prairie to either make it look like a prairie or something else. We got to catch up on the forestry. And probably of paramount importance, we got to catch up in the buildings. And you're well on your way to catching up in the buildings. That's the good news out of tonight. We had some conversation about the fees, and I got to tell you how impressed I was with the answer. I said, what's that dollar doing for us? And the answer is the dollar entry fee doesn't do much for us at all. But the person in the booth that's helping people learn about the park and that's asking what else there is in Dubuque has pretty tremendous value to the people coming in there. So I'm glad that we're doing that. And I don't think the dollar quite pays for the guy sitting there most days. That's a fact. So whether we raise that to increase a little capital for park maintenance, I think that's inconsequential what that fee can do. I do know what it did back in the 70s and 80s when we were talking about Eagle Point Park. We were talking about it was the thing to do, make your car as loud as it can be and as fast as it can be and tear through the park impress your friends. And people didn't like that much. And so the dollar was put in pretty much as a road use tax to eliminate that behavior, and it worked. That all went away almost instantaneously. Don't think it's coming back, but I think it is worth having the body in the House to answer questions and keep things going. So whatever fix we come up with, I guess what I want to tell you tonight is, I get that there's a problem, and I get that we have to get it bumped up to a higher priority. But everything that we do takes longer than you want it to take. Everything that we do takes longer than we want it to take. It's taken us 40 years to recover from the 80s and to get our economic outlook generally looking very good. But we don't have a way to reach out and grab money, and frankly, with our we've done really, really well with federal grants. All of a sudden, that gate is, it's not closed, but it's, the opening's a lot smaller. So getting through that opening and finding our way to that kind of prosperity is challenging. So we're gonna do everything I'm gonna do everything that I can to help find a way to get this done. I think we're gonna have a lot of conversation in September when we do our goal setting on Eagle Point in specific. And if that rises to the top, and I got a sneaking hunch it could, that'll become a higher priority. The staff will work all year to get to this presentation next year on how they're addressing that priority. That's what all of these 35 presentations have been, is coming after the things that we set up last August that needed work, that needed attention, that needed the highest, because the reality is we're finite in staff, as you've really heard here in this group. We're finite in fiscal resources. So the 200 some ideas that come in the door for a goal setting session, for instance, you couldn't possibly do them. You couldn't begin to do them. Every single one of them standing on its own would be a great thing for the city. So we walk out the door the other end with 10, maybe 12, if the facilitator will let us, and they fight us like hell when we try to do that. Things that are within the scope of what the departments can do with their human resources and with their financial resources. And if it's a reach beyond that, they're coming back here to say, okay, you want us to do this, but you're gonna have to find us X amount of dollars to do it. So that's the challenge we're up against, is how to keep all of these pieces that are all important to everybody. And I admit, we've ignored Eagle Point Park for a while. We have said no to some things that we just couldn't make the reach at that time. And we can't make many reaches this year, probably less than most years. But I'm gonna be looking hard to find a way to reach. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, I'm gonna.
Mr. Mayor, I have one more.
Sure, go ahead.
Steve, I'd like to ask you on request 3 of 7 that was not recommended. It is the full-time maintenance technician position at the park division, but it does not say a specific park. For instance, if you were to have a yes on that position, where would you place that person?
That's a good question. We have 9 maintenance technicians in our department currently. So there is, to kind of give you an idea of what they do, we have 1 at Eagle Point. We have 1 that bounces between Flora and Murphy Park and maintains those 2 parks with temporaries. We have 1 that helps with our ball fields and our pool maintenance. We have 1 that manages our playgrounds, inspections and mulching program. How many am I up to? Is that 4? And then we have 1 that's focused on cleaning restrooms during the week. So his job is to go to all of our satellite facilities and clean all of our restroom buildings. We have 1 that is, we have 2 that are project oriented. So if the soffit needs to be fixed at the golf course, or shingles come off a roof at Murphy Park, those guys are our maintenance team that goes out and does that. So we have them kind of spread all over.
Gotcha.
You know, I don't have a specific location. I mean, do I think Eagle Point would be a good fit? Most likely, yes, because we know that's where it's needed. You know, so most likely, yes. But we again, we have so many things, like, you know, if something happens out of Bergfeld in the restroom, we've got to send someone out there to fix that. So we've got staff that kind of bounces all over the place. There's only 2 people that are basically 2 maintenance technicians that are focused in parks, and 1 is Chris in Eagle Point, and then Evan works between Flora and Murphy, and then everybody else does all the other things.
And if you had 1 position to request for Eagle Point, what kind of position would you request? Would it be this?
Yes, yep. Yeah,
Okay.
maintenance technician is what we would ask.
I would like to propose that we hold this for further discussion, 3 of 7, for the end of budget.
So I have an idea that might be related, but a little bit different. Your first one, number 1 of 7, is recommended, and it's specifically for the B branch.
Correct. It's funded by stormwater funds, not general fund.
So it's funded by stormwater specifically to be able to be in the B branch. Yeah.
Correct. Yep.
Well, that makes that complicated, doesn't it? Seemed like an easy out.
That would have been good.
That was such an easy out. All right, I do want to consider this, so let me come back to it, but let me just say first. So a couple things. This is why you have a city council in a city that has open meetings, is so you can come and do what you just did. This was a fantastic discussion tonight. I mean, this is exactly the way things should be discussed and done in our community, and in any community, really. So I really sincerely appreciate the ideas that you brought here, and you did it in a public forum. It's helpful to email, it's helpful to write, it's helpful to call. There is a certain power to being able to talk to the whole community, and that's what you did tonight, and I think that we all appreciate it. So thank you for kicking this discussion off. We've officially spent an hour talking about Eagle Point Park tonight, in discussing this, and I think it was a worthwhile use of our time. There were some really good ideas that came tonight. I think one of the best that I heard is that there is a desire for people to be able to volunteer in some capacity to be able to help in doing this. That is an immediate fix that I think we can all go after. In some way, shape, or form. We heard a couple of, it was Ms. Russell and Mike Van Milligan, our city manager, talked about the idea of starting a nonprofit. That's a sort of a step even further than coming up with a group of volunteers that can work with Steve in the Parks Department and coordinating that and making it something that can be both helpful and safe. I got to admit, I got a little nervous about the chainsaw discussion with somebody just like going at stuff with a chainsaw. That might work for some folks, but not for everybody. And I think our city attorney would have some things to say about that too. So, but that said, there's all kinds of ways that volunteers can help. You had a great example of one. During 1 week, there were multiple storms, lots of sticks and debris down. That's a place where, I mean, we all do that in our own yards. That's a place we could do in our own parks too, and come together and do that. Doesn't even need to be the people sitting here. It can be anybody. I think there are a lot of people that would have a desire to do that. It's an immediate fix. It's one that doesn't cost money, and I think we should do it. I think we should absolutely go after that. There's also another really good opportunity to be able to talk about what do we need from our parks in general, and I think this is going to bubble up to the top as one of the biggest things that people are going to talk about. I'm looking at the website that you showed us for the master plan. There are 6 different dates coming up throughout the summer to be able to talk about the parks master plan and what needs to go into that, which will get presented to the city council in January, which means presented to the whole public in January, to be able to say, this is the plan, and this is what we're going to start to look at, and that'll absolutely tell us what we're going to be budgeting for next year. It'll come up for the budget discussion. That's another great way that people are going to be able to get very involved in this. I do have to point out the challenges with funding and what they are. I was looking back on this in the discussion of all kinds of things budget this year, and we've raised people's property taxes for, I think, 3 years in a row now, if I'm not mistaken. Residential property taxes. One time we lowered the levy and the residential property taxes went up because of the rollback. That was a really frustrating situation. It is something we take very seriously, and it's something that we are very challenged by because we recognized what that does to people and their personal lives. When you ask for more money to be able to fund things, we have to think about that very carefully. And we're not even only asking for more property tax money, we're asking in the end to raise rates on things like stormwater fees and water and sewer. And we're going to be having some serious conversations about all those things here in the next couple of weeks. So that's to say, there is only so much that we can push that before it just doesn't work for us as a community. I mean, it's way too much to be asking for all of us as taxpayers. So we're trying to find that balance, and I think we're striking it as best we can this year. But what that means is we don't have much more room to move up. We are not going to get much from our federal government in the next few years of these types of grants to do stuff with this. That's been made very clear to us. We're also probably not going to get a whole lot from the state of Iowa in grants to be able to do things like this. Even things like historic tax credits may be lessened rather than increased by our state. So in a lot of ways, we need to figure this out on our own, and I think over the next few years, we need to do that from a budgetary standpoint. That does bring me to this package, though. I do think we should hold it, and I think we should have more discussion about it. What happens when we hold something for separate discussion at the end of the budget process is we have to figure out how to pay for it. So as a city council, we'd have to take something else away in order to pay for this. So if we took something else away from another department, for example, or this department or the Parks and Recreation Department in some way, we're losing something to be able to gain something back. So that's what we would be suggesting. But I do think we should hold it based on the discussion tonight so that we can have further discussion about it. So I would be a vote. Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Once again, City Manager Mike Van Milligan. I think it's important to explain to the people in the audience of why that's the way it has to happen. Why is the city council put in a position that the only way to fund things that weren't recommended to be funding is to take some money away from something that was recommended to be funded? And the reason is, this was about 3 years ago, the state of Iowa changed the law on how property taxes work. And the way it used to work is the mayor and city council would go through all these meetings, 7, as you said, hearing from 36 different divisions about what's being asked for in the budget and what's being recommended. And then at the end of all that 2 months of process, the mayor and city council would establish a property tax rate. So if there were things that they thought should be funded that weren't funded in the recommendation, they could fund them. When the state changed the law, again, about 3 years ago, they now make the city council establish the property tax rate at the beginning of the process, and you cannot change it. Oh, you can lower it, so you could do less than is recommended in the budget, but you can't raise it. So if you decide there's something in this budget that wasn't recommended that you think should be in there, your only choice is to find something that was recommended and take it out. And so while I've never agreed with what the state legislature did, because I think it really takes decision-making out of the hands of the mayor and city council, and I'm sure it frustrates residents, many who probably came tonight, and if your answer could have been, yes, let's add this position to the city budget, and it will cost a little bit more in property taxes, but that's what we'll set as the property tax rate. You just can't do that by state law. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, Mike. I think it's important that we recognize all that too. Okay, so any other concurrence to hold this for separate discussion? It would take 4 of us. All right, we've got it, all of us here. Ms. Roussel, do you want to chime in just in case? That's okay. So we've got enough votes to be able to hold this for separate discussion. So this is for the maintenance, the number 3 of 7, correct? Am I right about that?
Yes.
Number 3 of 7 on the improvement package list. So that will be held for separate discussion in the final evening.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Mr. Jones.
Just for everybody here, that final action will happen on the 28th at 6:30 PM in this room.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so that's the end of the official Eagle Point Park discussion that we had. So I appreciate, again, everybody's time in doing that. I'm sorry, we don't have any more room for public, but please reach out to us. Please do reach out to us and we'll be able to talk more. Okay, as for I want to wrap up with parks here. I do have actually one more thing that I want to just ask, because as parks, you're in charge of the flags that go up in the parks and things too?
Correct.
Yeah, so I have, my family members don't call me that often, but when they do, it's important to them. And I've got a family member who's a veteran and was driving by the park that is at the corner of 61 and 151 at the bridge that was redone last year. I forget the name of that park.
Rockdale Grandview Entry is what, we don't really have a name for it. We call it Rockdale Grandview Entry, yep.
Yeah, the Rockdale. So, and the flags were a little tattered to his liking, and was just curious when those get changed, and I'd like to know that process because I can't remember, I'm afraid.
Yeah, so we keep a pretty close eye on them throughout the year. The flags, to be honest with you, flags are being made cheaper and cheaper these days. You know, we've had a lot of wind too, and they don't last very long in the wind. We have over 68 flagpoles that we are responsible for. So usually every couple weeks we're out checking them. But there could be one that's frayed a little bit, and we get a windstorm, and the next day it's got a rip in it. So it's a little wintertime. It's a little slower as far as the maintenance program, but because we're not out and about everywhere. But in the summertime, our restroom person is actually in charge of flags, and so as he's going to all the satellite restrooms, Bergfeld, Valentine, all those, he's passing all those flags. And then we also have Park Patrol on during the summer, and they help us raise and lower them, and they'll give us a heads up, hey, this flag's ripped or, torn. So, yeah, we do our best.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and if we get a call or if we get notified, please reach out. So
All right.
as soon as we get something, we're usually on
Go
it,
and figure it out, yeah.
that day or the next day.
Thank you,
So.
Steve. Well, this one's the notification for that park at Rockdale then, if
Gotcha.
you wouldn't mind.
All right. Tomorrow.
Yeah, yep. And, I should mention too, for public input, this is the first public hearing of 4 tonight. So we're going to have another public hearing here as soon as we're done talking about this. You'll get more opportunities for public input, specifically about recreation in the Grand River Center and Five Flags tonight. Okay, anything else on the Parks Department budget? Okay. Thank you very much for this conversation tonight, you guys. This is very helpful. You started by talking about how much you care about this work, and I think it shows every single day, and I think you do it very professionally. And I think all the folks that work both full-time and temporarily throughout the season are very professional in their work and take great care in it. So I appreciate that very much, and keep up that great work while we continue to make improvements as we keep going. So thank you very much for tonight. All right. Well, our next public hearing this evening is on the recreation program. So I understand we're just going to move right along here and keep it going. We're ready for you, Dan.
Are you sure?
Absolutely.
All right, good. Dan Kroger, Recreation Division Manager. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for allowing me the opportunity to give you a brief summary. If I told you about everything we were doing, it would be, quite long. So, like I said, I'm here to represent the Recreation Division. I don't know if you heard about the comprehensive plan, but there's a few of the slides that'll have this logo on it. And I just wanted to bring up, Mayor, because you mentioned just a second ago that on the website there are 6 different events for people to be able to come to, and that is true. But that is not the only opportunity that the community is going to have to meet with us from now until August. We are going to be out in the community in nauseam. We will be at the pools during lessons. We will be at parks. We will be at farmers markets. We will be at community meetings. So there is going to be way more than 6 opportunities for this community to help us create their plan, right? So, and all of our plans. First, I wanted to just talk a little bit about the team that I oversee. I sometimes breeze through this slide, so I just want to take a little bit of time. Again, just like Steve said, and I echo Steve and Marie's sentiments about Steve's staff. They are incredible. They're incredible partners for us in the things that we try to do. These are the recreation staff that are equally as wonderful. Some staff on here, like Jana Bowe, has been here for over 20 years. She's been your aquatic supervisor and TR specialist. And then we also have some new faces. So I know Angie was mentioned earlier. She's here today. She's our lead administrative assistant. And we have a new PGA pro in Nick Stroshine, who is already coming with some fresh new ideas and is very motivated as far as growing the game, especially with youth. So we're very excited about that. Also, not represented on the slide, she was represented in Steve's slide as one of the 2 confidential account clerks, but Toming Coben is one of those account clerks. She's not represented in my budget, but she is the heavy lifter for us as far as the financial pieces, getting the bills paid, getting our credit cards reconciled, those kind of things, and does also equally amazing job. So with our recreation division, we did as staff come up with a mission statement several years ago. And the statement is to provide the Dubuque community with accessible, high quality, and inclusive opportunities that will create impactful experiences. every program and service that we provide or that Steve's teams provide out in the field is an opportunity for someone to have an experience. And what are experiences? Experiences are memories, right? How many people came up today about Eagle Point Park and talked about when they were kids? How many people come out to you or come out to us as staff and talk about the playground program when they were kids, or the pool lessons, or whatever it was? We have an opportunity in Parks and Recreation to do that every day, and that's why we love it, and that's why we do it as hard as we do. How do we make this happen? Or I should say, what do we do to accomplish? So we do quite a few things. You all are very familiar with them. As far as programs go, we have youth and adult athletics. We have neighborhood drop-in programs, playgrounds, aquatics, therapeutic recreation, early childhood, golf, mobile recreation, and active adult programming. A lot of that we can't do without our partners. So our partners are extremely valued throughout our community and also internally. We work with several city departments, whether it's the HR department to help us navigate the hiring process for all of the 200+ staff that we need to be able to carry out these programs and services. We work with the fire department, the police department, and programs. We work with the finance department very closely, especially the communications department. Randy and his team are the ones that get the word out and help people understand when what we're doing and when we're going to be there, as well as how they can apply for our positions and what does it mean to work for the city of Dubuque in a temporary capacity. We also manage facilities. So obviously Flora and Sutton Pool, the Port of Dubuque Marina, Bunker Hill Golf Course, Allison Henderson, Comiskey Park are our one-room schoolhouses, right? The Miracle League Complex and the Slattery Center. We provide services, whether it's customer service. Angie and her front desk staff don't answer just questions about Parks and Recreation. We're a common phone number that people know, and we get questions on where's the closest McDonald's. I mean, we get everything. And her staff take those calls, and they take care of every customer that reaches out to us. We do the marketing. Well, we help, I should say, with the marketing with the communications department. And it's obviously very important for us to be able to get the participants into our programs and services. Now come the fun data stuff, right? So this year, employee retention is huge for us. Back several years ago when we struggled to be able to fill positions, we had to close the pool. You guys are all familiar with the whole struggles that we had. It was very important for us that when we captured our employees, we wanted to keep our employees because that made the hiring of new employees the next year easier, less of a burden. This year, we have 68% of our staff that worked for us last year are already committed to coming back to us this year. That's incredible. Last year, we were at 59%. So that's even growing. Employee recruitment, you can see from this chart, we have a 13% increase in total applicants through March. That's a combination of the work that we've been doing with the Human Resources Department and the Communications Department and the Finance Department. It's all a collaborative effort, so it has to do with getting people onboarded. It has to be with getting people to want to apply. Has to do with wages, right? So that's a phenomenal number, and we are already at a point to where we're confident that we're going to be able to fill all the positions that we need to be able to provide those programs and services. Again, partnership and planning, these are a couple examples of things that we've done to make things more accessible or more attractive to our community. Just last year, we partnered with the Creative Adventure Lab. So for when people came in to get scholarships or apply for scholarships through our department, they were automatically given a scholarship to the Creative Adventure Lab, and that was a $180 value. So if you add that with a $150 value of our scholarships, families are getting $330, right, of opportunities to do stuff within our community that they normally wouldn't have. Miracle League of Dubuque, of course, huge. unbelievable, awesome group of people, constantly looking for ways to improve on the park and the programs. They worked very closely with Jana and her team as far as getting all the volunteers. That's been talked about before tonight. There are a lot of programs that we can't do without people like that. We were able to expand our mobile recreation curriculum this last year, again, through partnerships. We partnered with the Art Museum in Dubuque, as well as our Montessori school, to kind of change some of the services that we were providing out in the community. And then we also are looking at different ways, kind of similar to the Creative Adventure Lab, as well as expanding our mobile recreation, where I used to come up and present to you and say, this year we had between 25 and 30 partners to be able to carry out all of our programs. We still have those partners, but we want to talk with those partners about our programs, and we want to figure out if what we're doing is being effective and most impactful. And if it's not, how can we change that? Or what is another thing that we want to do throughout the community? And so we will try and go out and find another partner that can help us achieve that, whether it's a space that's needed for the program or whether it's type of curriculum or supplies, whatever that is. And so we now are tracking those new and revised partnerships, right? And you'll see that in the performance measures that you have in your packet. Very excited to say, I remember last couple times that I've presented to you regarding the dip in participation in programs post the pandemic. This past winter is the first time that we've gotten over 1,000 registrants for our winter programs, which is normally our smallest collection of programs or participation throughout the year, which is extremely exciting. And as a complete calendar year, well, a fiscal calendar year, so fall programs, winter programs, and summer programs. Last year, so FY24, 89% of those programs ran, which is remarkable. We had a new Winter League program this year for the Miracle League that's servicing over 40 participants. And we continue to increase in our adult sports, which is also great to see. Last year, the report was about a 20% increase in adult softball. That continues to go up. Not at 20% clip like it did last year, but even one or two teams is in the right direction. For our facilities, golf participation continues to increase. Last year, for youth, I presented that we had a 19% increase in youth programs. This year, we have another 17% increase. Same thing for golf and our women's programs. Last year was 11% increase. This year is a 13% increase on top of that. Last year, we had a 21% increase in couples. Last time I presented, we had a 21% increase in couples. Last year, we had a 25% increase in couples. Golf is booming, and that is something, like I mentioned before, about our new golf pro, Nick. He is so focused on working with youth to blow these numbers away. I'm very confident that he's going to get that accomplished. I wanted to show some pictures of the filters at the pool. Last year, with some capital dollars that you were gracious enough to provide with it, we were able to change out these filters at both of our pools. That's just a couple of our nasty pictures at the top of what our tanks looked like and what we're filtering our chlorinated water. To below, that's a picture of Flora Park, and that's what the new system looks like. So it's pretty cool. Also, again, Trees Forever has been mentioned a couple times tonight. We had 46 trees removed since 2022, either removed or blew down at the Bunker Hill Golf Course. To date, we've replaced, just as last year, I should say, we've replaced 14 of those with the help of Trees Forever. And we have a plan in place for the next 3 years to be able to not only replace all 46 of those trees, but actually increase the number of trees that are on the golf course. I love data. I think you guys know that from other presentations that I've given you. This is an example of a way that we're looking at how data is kind of driving some of our decisions. These are specific to the pool. So this is a sample of, on the left, you have the number of swim lesson programs that were available last year. The blue are the daytime programs that are traditional for us, and the orange is the evening programs. I went back through a ton of brochures all the way back to 2012 before I got here. There was one 5:15 session for evening classes in previous years up prior to the pandemic. And then when we came back, we had to do some rescheduling because of staffing issues, all these different things. But we have constantly heard from families that it'd be nice if they had more access or more opportunities, because the traditional 9 o'clock lesson or 9:30 lesson or 10 o'clock isn't perfect for everybody. So this past year, when we worked through the schedule, we were able to find a way to increase our offerings. And what this chart shows is about 24% of the programs were held in the evenings, yet 40%, so that middle column of the participants, were in the evening. And then you can also see on the right the participants per program. We had 13 participants per code number in the evening, and we had 5 per code number in the evening or in the mornings throughout the summer. Why am I telling you this? We're altering the schedule again this summer so that we can offer additional evening classes to continue to fill that need. Other ways that we're advancing service is working with, this past year, Brian Feldat, one of my recreation supervisors, was able to work with the library and the Community Foundation for a book grant for $3,000 for a mobile book program that'll be used for our playgrounds. Also, within the playgrounds last year, there were some grant changes with the Boys and Girls Club to the point to where they weren't going to be able to deliver the food to our playground system. So we sat down and looked at our resources and said, how can we help still make this happen? And we're able to figure out a way so that we could be the ones that actually transported this food, so that we were able to continue to serve the thousands of meals that we do in the summer for our playground participants. Scholarship opportunities, again, I mentioned before, so for families that qualify, we give $150 in scholarships that are available to anything that we have in our registration system. And this past year, over $21,000 was redeemed in those programs. And this is kind of a snapshot of how those programs or how those scholarship dollars were spent. So it's not just, they're not just spent on one thing. You can see 20% of them were spent on recreation classes. And I'll get a little bit later, or actually the next slide, I'm going to talk about our performance measure about participation. But this access allows these families, again, like I said, to open up the entire playbook so that they can take whatever programs or services that they would like to. So this is kind of the key performance measure that we follow to let us know how we're doing as far as our programs are concerned. So the numbers the number of programs are based off of code numbers that are in our system. This keeps it consistent throughout the years. So it doesn't include like our playground program that services anywhere from 700 to 900 to 1,000 kids a summer, or our adult softball programs, or our adult sport programs that what might count as one, even though there's 12 to 15 players on the roster that actually are participating in that program. So this is specific to code numbers with registration numbers that are tied to them. And what is encouraging for us is, again, if you remember after the pandemic, there was a pretty steep decline in participation. There was also a decrease in programs that were available. And so we've been trying to work our way up. And in 2022 was amazing, but it was also because we offered 467 programs. So we added 150 programs in 2023. So our participants per program dipped, right? But we knew that was going to happen because we added so many offerings. But what's nice to know is this past year, we added to those 150. So we added 5 more programs, but at the same time, our participation per program also increased, which meant that we are providing services and programs that people are wanting to take and are wanting to, more people are wanting to take them, if that makes sense. As far as community investment goes, we talked about our workforce, specifically our seasonal employees. They are our front line. They are what make our programs and services go. They're the face of our community. Over 25% of the entire Recreation Division operating budget goes back in the form of wages or payments to our community members. So that leads to economic impact. Those programs and the skills that these staff learn when they're in these spaces gives them experience for whatever they want to do when they grow up. And it also, like we mentioned, them being the face of our department, they are our community engagement leaders. They're the ones that get to hear the things that the community is thinking firsthand when they're working directly with them. So for all those things, it's about $31, $32 a household for us to be able to provide all those services and programs and facilities. Also, there's safety and opportunity. So we do provide, as I mentioned before, low-cost and no-cost youth programs and other programs, but throughout the school year and in the summer. And that equates to safe environments for youth to participate in. It increases activity in public spaces, and it also increases the ability to monitor. One of the examples of this is with the Comiskey project. The year after, once we opened the splash pad at Comiskey, there was actually an increase in calls to the police department for, we'll say, undesirable activities happening at the park, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that in prior years there were less of those activities, but what that meant was there were more people in those spaces that were there to actually call to say that there was something happening, right? So then going on in the future, we can actually measure if those go down or not. But the amount of calls is actually a good thing, not a bad thing. A couple of our larger subsidized facilities, so our pools, that is our largest subsidized facility. There are user fees that help offset that tax support, but it costs the average home over $7, just over $7. And the marina, which we've worked very hard on an annual basis to try to keep that subsidy or that tax support down, is 99 cents a person or a household. Some of our future initiatives, the completion and implementation, again, of the comprehensive master plan. As I mentioned earlier, this is going to be one of those things that our department is going to be heavily active in, especially my division, as far as going out and taking tents and, hanging out at different activities and trying to collect as much information as we can. So that's going to be really cool. And then the department marketing plan. Some of the things that we'll get from the study will have to do with how we need to better market and promote our programs and services. There will be some branding ideas and some other stuff like that. So we're going to be working very closely with the communications department. The Let's Go sunglasses and the We Got Fun and Games for you Guns N' Roses fans out there. Those were water bottle stickers that we did a couple years ago that Kristen and Randy's office did that were a huge hit throughout the community. So we're really looking forward to be doing some more of those kind of things to get the word out, not only about our services, but also just with the rebranding of the Parks and Recreation Department. And then also continued ancillary or non-programmatic revenue generation. I think that's going to be huge for us to be able to keep our fees low and affordable and accessible, but also be able to chip away at that tax support that we have in our department. And I know that I mentioned it last year, but just our new banner sales program that started had generated over $30,000 in net revenue in 1 year. And Haley is working extremely hard on improving that program. So sky's the limit for that. Recommended improvement level packages. So the golf position, it's a correction in FTEs for the Golf Pro. It's essentially taking that from a 0.94 to 1. Prior to the Golf Pro, the history of the Golf Pro was that it was a contractual position. And then around 2012 or so, the city decided to make that position a full-time position, but they didn't change the FTEs for it for various reasons. And so we're kind of correcting that. So Nick, our new Golf Pro, can now accumulate vacation time and sick time and all those kind of good things. Also, it's important to note that the golf course fees for the golf course offset the expenses, the operating expenses for the golf course. So this position is actually funded through golf fees. So that's an important thing to note. The Four Mounds Adventure Camp support for this summer. During the Community Development Block Grant's new 5-year plan, we found out that this program and some of our other programs were no longer going to be eligible for CDBG funding. And so this recommendation is, it's a fiscal contract, not a calendar contract, so it's not specific to the summer of '24, the summer of '25. So because of that, there is funds still available to finish out, or to start, I should say, the June program for the Four Mounds Camp. This funding is to be able to complete the program for the summer of '25, and then it's a non-recurring request, so it would not be funded in future years through the operating budget. And then the last one is a dollar increase on golf daily fees for the Bunker Hill Golf Course. That is a recurring revenue that could generate up to $48,000 additional dollars for the golf course. What we do with those is we alternate those every year. So we review the daily fees 1 year, and then next year we review the passes and some different stuff, and then it kind of goes back and forth. It doesn't mean that we're always going to recommend a fee increase each year, but that's kind of how we review them. Just a few capital improvement projects. So the top 3 are actually funded through the golf funds. So I mentioned that the fees cover all of the operating costs. So at the end of the year, if there are access fees or additional revenue generated, that goes into a golf fund that is specific to the golf course. So we are allowed to use those fees for smaller projects. When we do need to go to a larger project like the irrigation or something like that, that's when we have to request that in the capital plan using either sales tax or DRA funding or something else like that that's non-golf fee related. And then the last one is some funding to be able to paint the outside of the flood wall as a welcome sign to Dubuque. The Port of Dubuque Marina is the only access via boat to actually be able to dock and just walk downtown. So we want that to be more recognizable. And so we feel a welcome sign will help kind of not only draw people in, but also help them with some direction in that area. And with that, he says thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Dan. Well, we are in a public hearing to discuss the Recreation Department budget for fiscal year '26. Do we have any public input on this evening? Doesn't appear so. Do we have anyone virtually? Thank you, Adrian. Thanks, Corey. All right, back to us then for any discussion.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, Mr. Jones.
You had an irrigation project that fell apart or something this year. Is that still in the mix somewhere to do, or is it done?
It is something that has to be addressed. We are trying to figure out if there are alternative ways to do that. That when we sent the bids out, the bid came back way over estimate. Almost 200,000, it's like $160,000 or something like that over estimate. And so we are working with staff to see if, is it something that we just try to need to get a more competitive bid out? We only received one. There's two local irrigation companies, local quote unquote, Midwest and Leibold, who are both in this area, who also do projects all over the country. Those are the two that typically bid on this project. Only Leibold was the one that did this time. And so we don't know if that is kind of what made it possible for the number to be so high. So again, backtracking, one option is to go out to bid again and try and solicit some other non-local, regional, something candidates for the job. The other is to redesign the project to maybe add another phase. So to see if we can possibly do it in 2 more. We have 9 holes left to go. And the way that they did the course was half of the course and half of the course. It wasn't like the front 9 and back 9. So it's potentially going to be difficult to be able to split. The last option is how long can we live with what we have, right? And try and figure out ways to piecemeal it to make it survive. So that's kind of where that's at.
I think the folks in town that are doing most of the residential sprinkler systems would be unable to meet the city's insurance requirements and other.
Yeah, it's definitely a niche job.
That can be kind of a barrier sometimes to all city projects. But I'll get off of that. I want to thank you for advocating for the welcome sign in the port. Sue and I took a cruise on the American Queen back when there was an American Queen, from St. Louis to St. Paul, and it was glaringly absent at Dubuque with some kind of river viewable sign welcoming us to tell us where we're at. Mm-hmm. I kind of recognized things I knew, but that'll be a nice addition.
Thanks, Mr. Jones. Mr. Sprink.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dan, thank you for I was really excited for that employee retention because clearly that was a goal of mine to get Sutton up and running when that came up a couple years ago. So thank you for figuring that out and convincing the kids to come back or the staff to come back again, because that is a big ask and really appreciative of that. And I know our citizens really enjoy having both of our pools up and running. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Wethel.
I think, first of all, I love your data. I think you do a great job with data and it's relevant. So some data just is data. Yours really means that this is what we found and this is what we're going to do to change our practices. So thank you. I will tell you that many years ago, my daughters both went at the same time to the 515 Flora Pool nighttime swim lessons. One got in, one didn't, was on a backup list. There was only one class.
Right.
And so finally, the day before, they let her in. My husband and I had a date night at Flora Pool while our daughters did swim lessons. But I remember my husband and I worked during the day. There was no other time we could do it. And it was that one class. So thank you. This is so great for working families who want their kids to learn how to swim, but just can't do the daytime stuff because their children are in childcare.
Right.
Great idea. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Jones?
I have to second that. I'm glad you're taking swim lessons seriously and making them available at different hours, because truly in a river town, that can be a matter of life and death for a lot of kids, whether they're going to get to grow up or not. Swimming is an important skill to have. Having been involved in water safety and general safety for all of my adult life and teenage life, Coast Guard keeps statistics on all the inland waterway drownings, and almost none of the people that drown even intended to get wet. So having the skill to be able to swim when you suddenly find yourself immersed in water, it's a big one, and you're saving lives by doing it. You'll never know who or how many, but I know that you are.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Farber.
Just a quick question again about the Bunker Hill Golf Course, which I have recently walked and ridden to have the view of what's going on there with some of the cleanup and also with some of the water issues. Are the golfers, they must be pleased that half of the course is taken care of, but are there going to be any concerns about those playing bunker this season based upon the need for a new irrigation system on 9 of those 18 holes?
First off, last year we had an irrigation issue. It was actually on the new side. It had to do with our satellites. The second part, I don't know if I want to answer because, well, I could knock on wood, I guess, but so far things are working fine.
And you're open now, right?
Yeah, one of the issues that we're going to deal with is some of the long runs that go down the fairways, those type of heads and things aren't even made anymore. We have a stockpile of our own that we've kept, and we actually have gotten some from other golf courses so that we have a good supply. So it's not something that's going to happen tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
But yes, we do have to come up with some type of.
I'll keep my fingers crossed, and
Yes.
hopefully the golfers will too.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Resnick.
Yes, thank you. And as someone who golfs at Bunker, I think fewer trees are okay. But my question to you is, of your improvement packages, I know you work closely with the Parks Division, of the improvement packages that you've submitted, which one would most likely cooperate with the parks and help them out the most?
Are you saying the package specifically or the
Well,
the funding amount?
You know, I'm not sure. I know there's a close connection between the two departments.
Yes.
And so you help each other out quite a bit. And so it might not be a specific package here, but maybe could you tell me in what way do you most closely work with the Park Division and to improve what they do as well as what you do?
We do have, this is the low-hanging fruit answer. We do have labor, some maintenance positions that are budgeted in the Recreation Division. So we do have a couple laborers that work at our pools to help offset what the Steve staff that he mentioned have to do on a daily basis at our pool facilities. We also have ball field crew, landscape crews that take care of a lot of the ball field care. And when Steve's staff are needed to help, it's normally because it's a larger piece of equipment or something like that. So we help to relieve there. We also do quite a bit of cleaning and maintenance of our indoor facilities, like Allison Henderson, which is one of our programming facilities. The staff that are there take it upon themselves to try to minimize the amount of time that Steve's staff have to come in to help with whatever a maintenance need would be or a cleaning need would be. I know there's more. They're just not popping in my head.
Well, I can tell that the spirit is there of cooperation and helping each other out. And I wanted to say I'm sure everyone appreciates that there's that kind of cooperation and helping each other with a very difficult job. So I also approve, and I'm sure the mayor is going to talk about the data because he's a data guy, and appreciate all that you're doing to make that data help us make decisions. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Mayor.
Councilman, I would like to just pony up on that if I could, because I did forget to say, when it comes to Steve's staff, you're a golfer. This winter, they came in and they're the ones that came in and redid our pro shop. There are several times during the winters where they've come in to bunker or come into one of our other spaces to make an improvement. They also were the ones that this off-season at MacLease completely redid the public restrooms there. And it's little things that his staff do sometimes. So like the logo at the counter at the pro shop, that was actually, the logo was the help of the communications department and my staff, but how the counter was designed and how that was put on, that was all Steve's staff that did that because they just wanted it to look cool, right? In the bathrooms that they redid at MacLease, they put up display boards so that we could put in, we didn't ask them to do that, but they just thought it was going to be a good idea. So as part of their project, they just did that. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that. I'm glad that you reminded me, so thank you.
Excellent. Those are great examples. Well, I'm not going to talk about data at all, just because Mr. Resnick brought it up. No, but obviously, it is really helpful to be able to have all this information when you come before us to be able to track this so well. And you said a couple things this year that were unique. One, the safety and opportunity example. Because I know that this is a budget built around public safety, and your example of how that actually is a part of what the recreation department programming is helping with, I think is such a great example. I mean, when we take good care in making sure that we have spaces for people to play and to do the things they want to do, that we have people looking out for each other more. I think that's a really good example. So thanks for bringing that one to the table. I loved your prior year highlights and all the things that you showed, especially the fact that we're seeing so much more registration in the winter programming, but then also just in general, all through programming. I mean, clearly we are on the right trajectory. So the last couple of years, you've come before us with some really good news, because that one year was really hard. And it was a really difficult year to have to talk about because we all wanted to be able to see better numbers, but it was just after the pandemic and things were really challenging. So I'm not going to say much about pools because I think we're going to hear a lot about pools as we go through this master planning. I think, you've brought some concerns to us. We addressed some big ones last year. You showed us some great pictures on that. But I do think that people are going to have a lot to say about pools in this master plan. It's going to be something we're going to have to look at pretty carefully and figure out a way forward on how we can make sure that we've got the right facilities for the community for the long term, because we're reaching the end of our life here on these. And you've mentioned that the last few years. Couple times, yeah. So I think it's going to become pretty clear as we start to hear that from people. So I don't have much more to add. I don't have any questions. I appreciate what you've brought for us here. So I think if nobody else has anything else, Dan, thank you very much for you and your entire team, and thanks for spending some time talking about them too. They do great work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are moving on to public hearing number 3, and I was wrong. I'm sorry. I left off the ImOn Ice Arena or the Ice Center when I was talking about that earlier. So we are at the Grand River Center, or the Grand River Conference Center right now, please.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Marie Ware, Parks and Recreation Director. First off, we'll talk just generally about the 3 different facilities that we have, Grand River Center, ImOn Arena, and Five Flags. Those are serviced under projects and facilities, so myself along with Jared Charland, our project and facilities manager, also helps with everything related to all that we'll talk about. We do have the 3 different centers, and that's Five Flags Civic Center, and Aaron Rainey, the general manager, is here this evening with us. Grand River Center has Ryan Boniface as the general manager. Ryan couldn't be here, so Rick is pitch hitting for him, so he's here with us this evening. And ImOn Arena has a general manager, and that's Mark Planteri. Also not on this slide, because actually the small amount of budget that we have for it, the EB Alliance Nature Center, which was brought up before. So Jared and I both work with that partnership that we have. That is located in the operations budget of Parks Division. And 50% of the operating cost we pay Dubuque County Conservation so that they staff that facility there. And as was mentioned, there's volunteers that also help with the staffing as well as fundraising and many other things there. The state of Iowa takes care of those outdoor resources of Mines of Spain. So the city manager had mentioned there's 30 acres, which the Nature Center sits on, And then, of course, all of Mines of Spain is all around that. That's 1,200 acres. So that's a great partnership. We really haven't mentioned it, but I felt like that was important to tell you because that's one more of the facilities. It's a city-owned facility that we have someone caring for and that we have some operations funding. So with that, I'll talk about Grand River Center. Grand River Center is operated, there's a partnership. We have OVG, Oakview Group, that is contracted for the management of the facility on a day-to-day basis and provides the staffing for that. As a city of Dubuque, we have that management contract that outlines that we have an operating loss, and that's what we make up. There's a budget that's approved, and that's a part of this evening. And as a part of that budget is a management fee and some incentive fees based upon what that agreement has. The building is owned by the city of Dubuque, so we do the capital improvement funding, and we also provide insurance for the building. The leadership staff at OVG is pictured here. Great staff. As you can see, they're in all the different areas, so sales and marketing, events, the chef, food and beverage, operations, finance, and the general manager. From a highlights perspective, and we brought this forth to the City Council, but this is a great time to re-review that. The OVG partnered with Culture City, which is a nonprofit dedicated to inclusivity and accessibility for individuals with sensory needs. And we all know individuals that are meet those needs. So that initiative aims to create welcoming environments for individuals with sensory sensitivities by providing comprehensive training to the staff there, equipping the venue with sensory tools, and offering resources and support for those guests that do come that have sensory needs. They do get certification through the Culture City, and that was done in September. Then also, they were recognized this year by the North Star Stellar Award, which is like the gold medal for a best convention center in the Midwest. And that's a very high honor because receiving this means that they had a commitment to excellence, reflecting on the team's dedication and exceptional service that they provide during the year. This year's winners, of which they were one of them, were selected from more than 8,000 votes and 1,000 nominations. So it really shows that they have excellent food and beverage offerings, professionalism of staff, sustainability, and other critical aspects that meetings and events experience of individuals that come there. Also highlighted is conferences and events. Obviously, we built this particular facility, and that was one of the key prime things we wanted to be able to do, was to host regional, national, statewide conferences. And that varies every year because, as many of you know, if you're part of professional organizations, they're usually on a circuit. They go from town to town to town. And so different years will report on this. So chose to feature this year that we had Tyson's do their spring vendor show. Cottingham and Butler has a major corporate event that is within the facility, and Bard's also did their annual meeting. So it's really a variety, and a lot of times it can be from the outside, but it also can be those that have actual facilities here or businesses here that bring their people back to our area to be able to have their conference and facility. Also, different kinds of events that we have. Some of them are localized, so many of you might have gone to a home show, a car show, a craft show. There's many different things throughout the winter that are activities that our community comes and enjoys Grand River Center for. Or if you have an out-of-town guest, for example, for the arts and crafts show, had my daughter-in-law with me who came into town, and we enjoyed that together. And that happens a lot with the activities that are there. We work with Travel Dubuque a great deal, and the OVG staff has created a really great relationship with them about being able to sell and promote Dubuque to all these different organizers of events, activities, conferences, to be able to showcase what our Grand River Center has to offer. Also, this last year, OVG has also focused on going to some different wedding shows, going away and being, many of you know that weddings have become destinations. So instead of just having it in the local community you grew up in, they select a destination to be able to come. And Grand River Center is a beautiful location for them to sell because it is so special and has so many different areas that are just extremely photogenic. Makes for a great wedding weekend. So it works out very well because conferences are something that really happens, and events are more during the week. And a lot of times those kinds of events like weddings and like car shows, things like that, they happen on weekends. So it fills the building more days of the year. We also have things like the changing of the guard for the U.S. Coast Guard. So they changed the guard for the Wakanda, and so they had a ceremony and a celebration in the river room that you see there. We have local fundraisers, so Dubuque Community School Foundation, Opening Doors Trivia Night, the list goes on of different activities where we have community groups that are doing fundraising or events here. Also, OVG has really dug into the community outreach. How can they be a part of the community, and where it's a giving as well as a sharing. And so Wahlert High School started a program, learned all about growing microgreens. So for any of you, those are the little bitty green things they put that are really cool looking on your plate, but yet taste really good. And so it really makes for, it shows off well. But the students learned all about that. They were able to start that, what's the kinds of things you need to be able to do that. So they learned a great deal. And Grand River Center is now continuing on with that tradition and having that available when they do their food services. If there's extra food, they'll donate that as appropriate to different places, and so the rescue mission has been a recipient of that, which also helps within our community. The staff of OVG volunteers monthly at different places, and so this one just shows that they were sorting clothes at Almost Home Open Closet. So they're helping with nonprofits. It's a team building for them. Great for both sides. And then also a very special event, and I remember the council talking about this as well, is when the Special Olympics has their opening ceremony there. Very touching. A lot of people really love going down and cheering on the athletes as they are in the Grand River Center facility for their opening ceremonies. From day one of the things OVG has really done is moving the bar up on the food and beverage for the facility. And as many of you know, many of us have gone to conventions or events, and if the food's kind of so-so, you note that. But if the food's really great, you talk about it and you tell people. In Dubuque, we like our roast beef and potatoes, and they don't disappoint in that way. But yet they've also added many different specialty drinks and mocktails particularly, that's a new thing that many people enjoy, have upgraded and branded based upon specific causes or events at times. Dessert, which is my favorite, are beautiful as well as tasty. And the offerings that they've also been doing, some of them are vegan, vegetarian, so if you have the different tastes that appeal to people, even if it's not your gig, I would tell you, try them out, because actually they're pretty darn awesome, even if you've never really gone and given it a shot. As I shared with Chef one day at a tasting, he knocked it out of the ballpark in taste and presentation, because there's a lot to be said for how you make your spread and how it looks and is it appealing and inviting. And yes, one of the perks that I get of the job is to be a part of the tastings. So what are people saying? So one of the things that we challenged OVG when we selected them to be a part of our Grand River Center was you need to move the bar up on a number of activities. And so what people are saying now are the things that we have focused on and that we said that we want customers to have better events, activities, responsiveness, a number of different items. And so within the presentation, there's several slides here that talk about the different, several of the ones that have used the facility. And one of the incentives they have is related to meeting the customer's needs and supporting the customers while at the facility. So as we look forward to the future, we also look to what we can build on. So the one slide shows the youth volleyball tournament. A youth volleyball tournament set up, so this is in the exhibit hall. So you're like, okay, how does that work? Because it's all carpet. They bring their floor in and they bring all the stuff that you see there in to be able to do these tournaments. So our local OVG talked to another connected facility, an OVG facility in another part of Iowa that said, there's this volleyball tournament and they're looking for another place to be. So they connected them up. Grand River Center staff was able to book this volleyball tournament. There was a certain number of teams you can fit with a certain number of courts. So the tournament organizer said, we have filled all up. Is there another place where we can expand to? So call was made. Five Flags answered the call and said, sure, we can accommodate more courts. So the tournament expanded. Then they filled up all of the team availability at Five Flags. And so they booked some courts or some space to be able to do courts at UWP. And so what started out as one activity turned into being in 3 different venues. And you can imagine the number of teams and the number of mouths that is to feed, the number of, as we call heads and beds, in other words, hotel rooms that became a part of this. This was over one weekend. And now this group was happy enough that they actually have booked next year for 2 weekends at both facilities. So definitely something that has brought people to our community. The Grand River Center's budget is such that it costs $18.37 to the average property owner to have Grand River Center operating. From a public safety standpoint, our agreement with OVG says that we can use the facility as an emergency facility. It could be used in all kinds of different ways, as you can imagine, because of the spaces they have. It just basically leaves it open. So if whatever emergency needs that as a possibility, we have that. It's another thing also where it's the community connection. It's a place where we care, we volunteer, we watch out for each other. And so when you look at some of the things I talked about volunteering at those local nonprofits, being able to have food drives, they've done coat drives where people can drop things off at the facility and then they donate them to the local charity. So all of this creates more community connections of this, not only the staff, but the connection that Grand River Center is also supportive of those nonprofits and the individuals that receive that support. From a capital improvements projects, there is just one that is recommended for funding, and that is a public restroom remodel. There is currently some money in the current budget, and this is the other part of that. We have just one performance measure, so as we go through the next 2 budget presentations, this is the only one that has the performance measure because it's a shared one. We talk about hosting community events and activities that support families and children. So what we do is combine all 3 centers because all of them have activities like that. And so we were up in fiscal year 24. We had 87 events across those 3, which is an 8.7% increase in number of events for families and children. And that is what I have for Grand River Center.
All right, well, thank you, Marie. We are in a public hearing to discuss the Grand River Center budget for fiscal year 26. Do we have any public input on this item? Seeing none here. Anyone virtually? Thank you both. All right. Back to us for discussion.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Jones.
Well, the place looks great. We've seen it not look so great in some years. Really, really proud of how it looks. I just had a quick question. All disposable dishes and flatware to be compostable. Who's composting it?
They pull it all, bring it in, and then I don't know if they use the landfill or if they use another service to be able to do
Because
that. I
you
guess I've
need,
never asked them.
Our experience with the compostable flatware is it really isn't, unless you have a process that adds heat to the composting, which we don't have. So it's, I'd sooner see non-disposable dishes and flatware, frankly, to be sustainable, but I get it. It's a well-intended move, but it may not be practical.
Yeah, and I can ask Ryan for more details on it to know.
And he may have a great plan, and it's perfectly practical.
Right, yeah, so we can find that out.
Thanks.
Ms. Farber.
Could you just walk us through the annual management fee and then the operating loss? And I see that the operating loss, the trend is our friend because it's going down, which I think is great. So thank you very much for your keen management. But could you explain the difference between the two fees that we pay?
Sure. So if you put them together, we break them out within your budget document so that you can see that. If you put them together, it's all a part of the loss. So if you add the two together, you get the total. But in here, we break it down so that you and also the public understand that OVG gets paid a management agreement for their services to be able to do this. And then the remainder of it is the difference between the revenues, all the revenues they take in. So they have a far larger budget, but then it's like all those revenues from weddings, conferences, and everything else. And then the expenses from all of those subtracted creates what that subsidy is.
And do you sit down with the management and come up with the operating loss percent? Or how is that, just so people understand how that's created?
Sure. We, just like we do with a city budget, we sit down, they come up with, what they believe that to be. They have all the line items, they have all the different things, we review that. There are times, because sometimes there's something going on where it'll go up or down. There's also sometimes where we have a budget, but some different things happen. So whether it's a weather or whether it's like it's a down year for conferences or whatever, sometimes that can vary. But they're still early on in their contract, so you're still kind of figuring out a little bit, and they're also still building the business, as you can see. So like we didn't have a volleyball before, weren't in that. That's why we're kind of talking about building some of those other avenues for different kinds of revenues.
Right, but is it a percent basis that you negotiate on the contract? No?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? I don't think I have any further questions. I've been there a lot lately. I was joking with Ryan and the team the other day that I should just get a cot maybe in a room somewhere else with all the welcomes I've been doing, which basically means that there's a lot going on at the Grand River Center. I was there, multiple times in 1 week here recently. So there's a lot of action. There are a lot of things coming, and great partnerships with groups like Travel Dubuque to make that kind of stuff happen. So I appreciate all the work that's going in there. And I am hearing good things. Just as you talk to people in the community and you see this, I think we start to see this pretty well. Are they tracking customer satisfaction? This is something that we're seeing, and I'm sure they are on a regular basis.
Yeah, every sponsor of an event or organizer of an event gets a survey that they fill out, and then we get to see that and we get to track, and they actually have an incentive related to that. If it's a certain and higher, then they earn one of the incentives. So it works well for us and it works well for them, because that kind of feedback that you're seeing there's a comment section, that's what you saw, but there's a whole other scoring about how people feel about this and this and this. And so then they can see, is it the food, is it the service, was it the pre-event planning, was it the post-event, kind of like where are the areas, like if you want to see a trend of which specific department or which specific area that it might be, and then they can work on that improvement. So, and they share that all with, they have all of that, and then they share that all with myself and Jared for our review, so that we can also see. So if we see that trend, typically if we're like, well, what about this? Then they already know, because they're like, well, we saw that, so we're doing da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
We meet with them monthly so that we can have those conversations about operations, about budget. We get those monthly reports so we know how things are going. And it's basically, we're always communicating, so there's not a lot of shocking at, 3 months down the road or whatever it happens
Sure.
to be.
Yeah.
We kind of know we're trending, whatever it happens to be.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you very much, Marie, and to the entire team there at the Grand River Center. So I think we will close that one out and move on to number 4 for the evening, ImOn Ice Center. ImOn Arena, it says Ice Center on here, but I think
Yep.
ImOn Arena is the official name, yeah.
Great. So my name is Marie Ware. I'm the Parks and Recreation Director. This is a presentation for the ImOn Arena. So with the ImOn Arena, you can see that Schmidt Island Development took over our day-to-day operations several years ago. They provide those day-to-day operations as well as the staffing. Then on the other side of the spectrum, you also see that we have a management contract with them as well. The city owns the building and we pay building insurance. We're in charge of the capital improvement funding as well as the operating loss and the management fee. You'll see a similar theme between the 3 different facilities that we have. Mark is our general manager and doing a great job there. When we talk about highlights of the last year, we have a number of them that relate to the ice arena. So Mark had relationships as the general manager with the Blackhawks, a USHL team, or NHL team. Got to get the right one. And they had this program that he wanted to be able to bring there, and he talked them into being able to bring the little Blackhawks youth hockey to our community. This is the only, we are the only location in Iowa. It's a learn to play initiative. And if any of you know anything about hockey, it's not the cheapest sport to be able to participate in. Because as a part of it, one has to pay for the ice time based on how many skaters are out there. You have to have a whole bunch of equipment to be able to do it. So it's a head-to-toe sort of a equipment. So this is for 5 to 9-year-olds. It introduces new players and their families to the sport of hockey. The Blackhawks are involved in it, so it's run by them. They get the lessons, the full gear, all the learning, some competition with each other, kind of see if it's a try it out and see if you like it. But it also is, like, if you like it, there's the next step that can possibly happen. So there was 26 boys and girls that participated this year. This was the first year. Mark reported it was the highest participation of all the other programs that are out there. So there's 6 different programs out there. So we had the highest participation for the first year. They charged $125, but they got everything head to toe and everything else was paid. Typically, you would probably pay $400 or $500 for just the equipment alone. So it's really a great program to get kids introduced to something. And then the kids can move into Little Saints hockey as a part of this. So it's like they kind of tried it out. It becomes a way to be able to move into what the next step is. So it's actually a great feeder program for us too. But the Blackhawks also do it so that you can get a ticket to go to a Blackhawks game so you can actually kind of see both levels. You get introduced to it, but you also get to see the pros out there and be a part of a game such as that. So it was a great program, lots and lots of great feedback from that program. We also have a Skate for All program. So the City of Dubuque, we provide, as a part of an operating budget, $10,000 a year, and that happens to be in Dan's recreation budget. And what that does is they came up with a program. They worked with the school district and said, how could we invite more young people and kids there? So they created free passes or vouchers to be able to come skate. So a guidance, they don't call them guidance counselors, but one of the individuals in the school can be able to give these vouchers out to families that they know would never have the opportunity for a skating experience, meaning they could come skate during open skate at any time. They also made one element of this being able to do field trips, and where you get to also introduce. So what you see here is the Jefferson Middle School field trip. And there's a lot of other pictures that went with it. It was kind of hard to pick, so I kind of picked the big group so you could see the variety and number of youth that participated. But it was really fun to see, and as you can see kind of in the background, they have the skate aids where it's like, you hold on to it so that you don't fall down, and you kind of get the idea of how to get those skates going and that sort of thing. So there was lots of those on the ground. Also a part of, and I say that because a part of this $10,000 was spent to get more of those. So when they had this kind of activity, they had plenty of that as well as plenty of skates. They bought some more skates as well. So have really put that to great use. We just had a meeting the other day where I'm like, okay, you probably want to continue some of these things. What are the other things? What are some great ideas you have for more introductions to people skating? They also have special events, so they had an Easter skate, and you can see that it's all ages because you've got an Easter egg spoon race, and you've got a lot of different people participating in that, as well as on the ice, as well as going and hunting for eggs up in the stands, being able to take pictures. A great event, lots of people involved, and had a lot of fun. We also have events like the Skate with Santa, so they kind of pick those different holidays and say what would be great to do. What's happened out of these things is that the open skating has become even more popular. So as you keep introducing more people, which is what you want to do, that they'll come back. Or, so if they came with school, maybe they're like, hey, please bring me back because that was really fun. Or they got introduced to it during an event or an activity, and then they decide, oh, I'd really like to do that. Another piece that they do is that they offer birthday and skate parties. So in other words, if you're looking for something to do with your kids and not have the party at home, they had that. And last quarter, they had 24 birthday and skate parties that were held there. So that's a significant number, and it has been increasing as it gains popularity. A really exciting addition that was put together, and it was a tournament sponsored by Island Social. So many of our partners, and obviously Island Social is on the island there. They put together a men's and a women's hockey tournament. Of course, UD has the two new teams, the men's and the women's team. So they were one of the 4 teams on both men's and women's. So the Key City Collegiate Classic was the men's, and the Mississippi matchup was the women's tournament with 4 different teams. It brought those teams here. Once again, you had people staying over, enjoying the facilities, and the teams went away saying, man, they have a really nice rink there. That was really fun, and they had a good time. We have many different ICE user groups, and that's one of the things that, to me, that is the greatest about the ImOn Arena. It goes anywhere from little peewee bantams all the way up to what they call the seniors and the fossils. And so it's for all ages, plus you have collegiate, and you have the Dubuque Fighting Saints as well. It's not just hockey, so you see figure skating there. So, we have open skates, figure skating. We have all the hockey at any kind of level, as well as our USHL team. Also, in addition, so DYHA, which is Dubuque Youth Hockey Association, they put on several tournaments. So there was 2 youth hockey tournaments that were hosted on 2 separate weekends that had 32 teams and 16 teams on the one on each weekend. And so once again, that brings people to our community. Typically, if they're youth events, that also brings the families and overnight stays. UWP is up there, and they have a club team. Their ice rates, because of the success they've been having, they've been able to drop the ice rates. Not a lot, but anything is good, right? And so they've been able to drop their ice rental rates for the youth. So for the DYHA, as well as the figure skating groups that rent on quite a basis. So those are all positives for how things have been going. The Dubuque figure skating has also increased in popularity and numbers over the last year. I was just told also, one other highlight that I'll say here, the Dubuque Junior Saints Bantam team, so that's the little ones, participated in the United States Hockey National Tournament. So that's our local team went to the national tournament. So the Bantam team won that right to represent Iowa at a national tournament. The Junior Saints had 3 games in the preliminary round where they won 2 and lost 1. So that meant they went to the quarterfinals where they won. And so then they were matched up against the team that beat them the first time, and then they just fell a little bit short. But despite this loss, it was the first time a youth team from the state of Iowa made it to the semifinals of the national tournament. So we have some really awesome building of our programs in this facility. And, you know, that just goes to show if you kind of work with it, market it, have the right people involved, have that enthusiasm, you can really, really build your programs. We do have some current and future initiatives. Our dehumidification project that you approved is a little over $500,000. It'll be starting in May after the Saint season, and with the majority of the completion by late August, because we need to fit it in between the major season. We did have concessions improvements, and one of the things that was identified that was really important, and I knew this from my time of just having that concession facility, is that we needed to speed up how quickly we can move the customers through, because there's only so many breaks in big games, and what you need to do is move people through those lines really quickly in order to, because that's where you make money at. So they worked on the counters, the shelving, the equipment, where it's all located, how it, you know, moves, how those staff are able to move more efficiently within that space, just upgrading those prep stations so that they can move everything through very quickly. And that concession money was funded by us, but they were the ones, Schmidt Island Development, that was figuring out, with DRA helping, because of course they're also in the food industry as well, helping to be able to come up with the right things that will do that. They still have part of the project to complete, but they've already seen increases based on the work that they did. And as I just talked about, we'll continue to increase the activation on the island and the arena as we go along in the future here. For ImOn Arena, for the average homeowner, it's $6.43. From a public safety perspective, ImOn Arena is a cooling center, so on those days where it's got that high heat, high humidity, and we give that list of places people can go, the ice arena is one of those. So ImOn Arena is a cooling center. They also have in their agreement that they can be an emergency shelter. They're a very different kind of facility, so you know, each of these could be used because of a different sort of an emergency, and that's available. When it comes to public safety, our police department, first of all, began using it for their recruiting sessions, for recruiting new officers, where they did a training before they did the performance testing, so they would do that, so they prepare people and have better pass rates for people. They're more prepared to come into the physical fitness areas of that. And then also there's the community connections. And when I look at this, one of the things I see when I'm out there and when we go, once again, we meet with them as well, you see people walking, lots of walking, and it's free. And so that creates those community connections. So whether you go by yourself or you go with your friend, neighbor, or relative, you're creating those connections. If you're seeing the same person when you're walking around, the chance of you talking to them, you make another connection. The more connected we are as a community, the more that we care for each other. And that you may not need us to help intervene because you have other support systems that are out there. And this is one of the ways that I know that that happens and is possible. And that's what I have for ImOn Arena.
All right, well, thank you very much. We are in a public hearing to discuss the ImOn Arena fiscal year 26 budget. We need public input on that. Not seeing any. Anyone virtually? No. All right, thank you very much. Back to us then.
Speechless.
Almost. Well, I'll just say, it's been interesting talking about this arena and with the discussion about the Schmidt Island sports facilities and that whole piece of it. This came up a lot, and actually the idea of a second sheet of ice came up a lot. And it's because this place has become a real workhorse. I mean, there is all kinds of action happening there. And that's, it's great to see, actually. And one of the things that I've been hearing a lot lately from people who are specifically in the hockey community is that when they travel to other places from Dubuque, the experience that they have at those other places isn't as good as what other teams have here when they come to Dubuque. So we're doing a really good job. Your team, the DRA, are doing a really good job in making that experience great. But I do think that this is something that we're going to need to have some pretty big discussions about. Because I do think that you look at the schedule of ice time on there, and it's packed. Yeah, I'm surprised that it's great that we can fit birthday parties in, but it's a big challenge. So, and then I just have to say this because he's going to get a real kick out of it. But congratulations, Jack. He was one of the players that was actually on that team.
All right.
A good friend of my son's, and yeah, so I'll just have to make sure he knows that I said that out loud. But that's great. I did not realize that statistic that was the first team from Iowa to make it that far. That's really impressive.
Big deal.
And they are fun to watch. They're a great team. They're a really great team. So congratulations to all those guys.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead, Ms.
Can I
Barber.
give a shout out to the Fighting Saints? They have their final home game on Saturday, and it looks like they will once again be competitive for the Cup and for the playoffs. So go Saints.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Well, we can move on from that one. Thank you very much, Marie. Our final presentation for the evening here is Five Flags.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Marie Ware, Parks and Recreation Director. So Five Flags Civic Center. We do have a Civic Center Commission, and I want to give a shout out to them. Two of them have been on for quite a long time, Bryce Parks and Mackenzie Blau. Three of them, you just actually, within the last month, approved to be a part of the commission. So they're new commissioners joining in. Those advisory commissions are really, really important to any of the operations, whether it's Parks and Recreation Commission, as was talked about earlier, or the Civic Center Commission. When it comes to management of Five Flags, ASM Global is our current management company, and then they do the day-to-day operations and the staffing, set up similarly to the previous two we talked about, as well as the City of Dubuque is in charge of the management contract. Our current contract has operating costs that are through a benchmark that is set by the agreement, and the building is owned by the city, as well as capital improvement funding. And then building insurance, again, is also a part of that. Aaron Rainey, the general manager, is here this evening with us. The leadership team for ASM Global, you'll see pictured here. So Greg Olson, he's Director of Finance, Aaron is General Manager, and Jesse Cosens as Director of Events and Operations. So why is the Civic Center important? Many people will ask that, or is it worth the money, or how many people go there? There really isn't, so this is the stats of what it is. So ticket buyers, and when you look at the income, it's a lot of people believe that it's probably all the higher income brackets that go, but what you can see here by percentage of ticket sales is it's a real range of individuals and income levels that do go to the Five Flags and buy tickets. And this is only the ticketed events. This doesn't include all the other things that we'll kind of talk about that are there that don't require a ticket. Also the age ranges, now because it's ticket buyers, the 18 is where it comes in. It's not like we don't have younger, but from a perspective of the age of adults, you can see it's quite a mix of all the different ages that actually buy tickets for ticketed events. So what is the importance of the Civic Center? It's things like Toys for Tots. So Toys for Tots is one of the most heavily attended events at the arena. It's an event that positively impacts our individuals and our families in our community. And as Bryce Parks really has shared, and he's the coordinator, so obviously you saw his name before, he's on the Civic Center Commission, but in his free time, he volunteers also as the coordinator of the Toys for Tots. And you can see how important that this facility is for the event that he helps to facilitate. It's a great location because it's within that walking distance for people to be able to come, as well as it has plenty of parking for all those others that want to come by vehicle. Additional activities that really amplify the importance of the Civic Center. St. Mark's Apples for Students. So they fill the bags. And if any of you know about this or don't know about it, there's all kinds of, people do donations to be able to buy school supplies. They lay them all out on tables at Five Flags, and then they have volunteers come in and pack them. And of course, if any of you have had children, you know there's a kindergarten list and a first grade list and a second grade list, and they all depend on what you need in those. And that's anything from crayons to markers to colored pencils and glue sticks and erasers, just all the basics that it takes. They deliver in 2024, they delivered over 3,600 supplies to area schools, both the public and the parochial schools. The supplies were provided for orientation night for Marshall, Audubon, Prescott, and Lincoln, where they just took enough for everyone. And then school counselors can then request supplies at the other schools. So in other words, if they know they're going to need them, they make sure they get them. They have them available during orientation, so children that need them will get them. So this is another great event that happens within the Five Flags. Also in the past, Resources Unite has used Five Flags for events that also assist our community members with different needs that they have. So it's heavily used not only for, you think of it as a concert venue or a theater event, but it's heavily used for our community events. As described, of course, this was the volleyball tournament happening in Five Flags, so you can see that here. And I can tell you that there was, related to Five Flags, because he had there was a city employee that was a parent of a player locally here. And what he reported is he was excited that they didn't have to travel. So this is sometimes for all the people that live here. They didn't have to travel to another place. They could actually stay home but still participate in the tournament. But what he heard from so many other parents is they could just go down, you know, Five Flags is this location where you can just go down the street. You can have a lot of different choices of food. You can also have a lot of different places where in between time you can browse some shops or just walk along Main Street, and it's a really nice place to be. So he was just anecdotally telling us about, when people knew he was from Dubuque, the comments that he was receiving. Additionally, an activity that was added this year to the lineup was pickleball, and many of you have heard about that, and it's been talked about in the newspaper as one of the newer things, as well as a growing sport. So it met some of the activity level for some of the pickleball players when there wasn't, so during dark times. So it takes, as you can see, it takes putting some tape down and having some nets, and voila, there you go. So that really makes it a great facility. We also have within the theater area there, we have an anchor tenant that's Dubuque Symphony, and they call Five Flags home for their season. And the theater is a really beautiful setting to have some really amazing, talented performers come and share their passion of music with our community. The theater also this last year was used as a wedding venue. So the nice thing about both the arena and the theater is that they really are multi-purpose. As you can see throughout the presentation, there's a lot of different things that can be used for each area. We do highlight some local events. So when I talked about the performance measures about family and youth events, they had several different special events. Trick or Treat Night, where kids, it was a great success. They had a big lineup that was out Main Street door waiting to kind of come and go in and go through the different booths and activities that they had for Trick or Treat Night. Wags at the Flags is always something for those two-legged friends and four-legged friends to get together, enjoy time to run around, play, pose, meet new friends. So it is definitely an activity that is a community event. And those that come each time because they love it that much. It's a way during the wintertime to get out there and not be in the snow and wet and all those other things. Other events and types of activities that happen are like a disc golf event. The Iowa Winter Games was there. The Colts do practices there. AYSO, meaning youth soccer, has practices there. The Dubuque Soccer Club. So it really is a very multi-purpose facility in that regard. But it also has those kind of entertainment venues, and each one is a little bit different. The Drumline was something that was a really high-energy show that was brought in. Steve-O was in the theater. Brewfest was something that you can see. A lot of people attended and really had a great time for that. Battle of the Bluff Rodeo, so as much as it can be this, you bring in a whole bunch of stuff to cover the floor, and you can have a rodeo as well, and very well attended. Price is Right. How many of us have watched Price is Right over the years and enjoyed it? And the people that come to that really, really enjoy it. Killer Queen, Nutcracker, Dirty Dancing just happened. So different shows and activities. All of this is promoted through social media, and that's one of the things that Five Flags is very strong on, because that's where people find out about what's going on. And you can see that by the numbers of followers they have, as well as how much that reach is. What that reach is it means how many people it's getting out to that tells them something's happening here. And, you know, I watch some of what the activity is, and you can see, like, there it says shares. That means somebody's saying, hey, like, we should go do this, or, hey, did you know this was happening, or, hey, let's go. Sometimes you even see the comments like, you know, they're tagging a person that they know really would enjoy going to an event like that. So social media is a really big place in order to be able to continue to fill our events, build excitement in those events and activities. The property tax support, so this chart each year kind of gets bigger and smaller, right? So it gets bigger, so all the text gets smaller. But what it shows is that there is a property tax support that goes along with Five Flags, and you can see by the green, that's the recurring costs for the different years. Some of that is within transition years and things like that. We did start adding on the top the dark green bar, which is non-recurring, which is more of the equipment that we buy, the other things that we have to do that's outside of that recurring benchmark and that operating cost. They're one-time purchases, or it might be that we received a grant, so the money came in, the money went out, but the expense happened. We put that there so that people would know if we said that the recurring cost was this and they looked at our budget, they'd be like, but it doesn't say that number. So that's what we tried to describe here. The benchmark performance, the way our current management agreement is, you can see what happens is there's a benchmark that's set, and that's all by a formula that's described within the management agreement. And if ASM Global comes in lower than that benchmark, meaning just like you saved in your budget, then we split that 50-50. So that means that's where the orange ones that are kind of above the zero line. When it happens that the way our agreement is when it happens that, oops, we went over budget for different reasons, then that's where it's below the line. The way our agreement reads is that when that happens, then we as a city pick up what that difference is. And so we had several years. One of them was the polar vortex, and the other one was the pandemic. And then this last year, it was just the difference in events, activities, different operational items that happened. Numerous things led to the 2024 number. So when we look at currently and in the future what we're doing, as you're well aware, we're going through the RFP process, meaning we just had on the City Council's agenda information related to beginning negotiations with OVG for management of the facility. So that's where we're at in the process for that. What happens is that our management agreement, our current one goes to June 30, so July 1st. So we're moving ahead so that we can make sure we have everything ready to go by July 1st. when it comes to, what do I mean by theater envelope assessment? So the theater has a number of things. It's a historic theater. Just like any old house, it has some things that go on sometimes, and then you have to address whatever those are. So we do have a leak in the roof. We have some damage and a little bit of framing in one particular, and that's framing up above. You can't really see it, that we need to address. We do have some water damage that was done during the pandemic that we need to attack, of which it's not like you just go in and put up new drywall, because we have a historic theater that's on the National Register. So there's a very specific way, there's very specific materials we must use in order to do that. We're also looking at what we call envelope modeling. So we're having a couple things happen within the inside, the interior of the walls, that in order for us to figure out what the problem is and address it, this modeling will help, because it looks at the heat, the air movement, all those different things within that historic building for what we need to be able to do, as well as looking at the masonry that's on the outside and the inside. So we did a tuck pointing project a number of years ago, earlier on in my career here, and these are things that we didn't do a full, so we have to look at that on the outside to see if there's some areas and the inside. We are moving this forward right now because there is some issues we just need to deal with. And so we had a little bit of CIP money where it's like, all right, let's start to figure this part out within the theater, because we don't want it to have degradation beyond where we're at right now, and determine what those issues are so we know what to be able to do next. When it comes to the building improvements, so it talks about an RFP for architectural and design services for the $24 million that I'll talk about coming up in the fourth quarter. That's at least what I've kind of put as a time frame. My predecessor may change that a little bit, and you may all agree, that it's better to do something a little bit later. We'll see, but overall, that's the target, is in the fourth quarter to go through the process to hire the team that will work with us on determining what are the projects that are part of that capital improvement money. I wanted to tell you that the budget that's presented just this year, so with saying that we're negotiating a new agreement, so what we've done is we've budgeted based upon what's in our current contract right now, because we don't have all the exact terms. But we're using those dollar figures as a way to be able to also back up and negotiate appropriately. So if there is some changes to it, in other words, if it would happen to go down or something would change, then through a budget amendment process, we would do that. So just so you know, the numbers that we're presenting tonight are really based upon the current, because we don't have the new one to be able to go off of. The other piece that's an up-and-coming initiative is arena football. So you see the logo that's there, the Iowa Power. So Iowa Power is the arena football team that's going to be Dubuque's team, and watch for details coming up on that. We couldn't do all the things we do without the community support of Five Flags. So there's a number of sponsorships, and you see the sponsors that are up on the screen there. We thank them for their support. It takes a lot of people coming together in different ways in order to be able to promote our Five Flags facility, as well as to sponsor programs, activities, or other cooperative sponsorships. For Five Flags Civic Center, the average homeowner would pay $21.79. When we talk about the public safety aspect of Five Flags, once again, it's an emergency shelter. It wasn't that long ago where we needed to be able to, when the Canfield had a fire, they moved people over. Red Cross came in, set up. So for a night or two, we were the temporary housing facility for the people that were affected by that fire. And so that emergency shelter was used in a specific way in a not very long ago past. But they can be used the same as the other facilities. We look at what's the right facility and what the particular emergency might be, but we have those capabilities to be able to do that. Additionally, there's also, in a different way, the community connections that also happen here. With the events and activities, and when you saw the different ranges of a person's income, there's a lot of times where a couple families may not go on vacation because they don't have enough money for vacation. So they get a couple families together, they go to Sesame Street, they go to one of the other shows, they might go to some of the free activities. That is how they make connections and become a more connected community with us as well. Our facility helps to be able to bring those people together. Public safety is about not always just the police or fire, it's about being able to bond with other people and knowing that I can care for you, you can care for me. I know what your needs are. During conversation, it's amazing what can come up about our shared needs, our shared opportunities. So Five Flags is another location that happens in, and it's really important. With the capital improvements, the one capital improvement funded or recommended for funding is the building improvements. So I did put on here that we do have $600,000 within the 24 budget rolling over in with 20 or 50,000 that would be in this particular budget. And then you'll see the remainder of that is divided between the 4 years coming up after that. So what that means is that you've got time to do this planning through fiscal year 25. Then you'll have that first group of money in fiscal year 26 as long as that continues on through the budget process. So it's a way to be able to fund it over several years. And with that, that's all I have.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We are on a public hearing to discuss the Five Flags Civic Center budget. Do we have any public input on this one? Seeing none. Do we have any virtual public input? All right, back to us then. Mr. Resnick.
Thank you very much. We've had a lot of success, and we've had some challenges at Five Flags over the years. I noticed that we have a transition coming, and so on the website we have upcoming events. There's nothing scheduled for July or August, really, August 30. So there's 2 months that there's nothing scheduled. Is that typical, or is this just they're done or something?
No, well, what I would say is that it's fairly typical that we're quieter in the summer. So that's when they do, because a lot of the big things happen in the other parts of the year other than summer. So a lot of times that's when they're doing deep cleaning, painting, all those kinds of maintenance work. Sometimes there's different events that do come in, or there might be like a youth program in the Bijou that Fly By Night is sponsoring, or smaller type events. Part of that had been done, particularly in the past, is, the casino is doing with the backwater stage. They're doing entertainment and events. There's other fundraiser, other groups that are doing things on Main Street. And so, it's always been kind of more of a time where that's community time that they're doing things, as well as you also have a lot of people on vacations in other places. So it's just been a time where the schedule is a lot more open. I will tell you that I know of at least one event that they just actually introduced on social media that would be in one of those months. So depending upon when you looked, it may or may not be there yet.
Right, on the website. So thank you very much for that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure the transition is going to be, a lot going on with the transition. Do you have some plans you could talk about, or just?
Yeah, well, I can talk more about what I know from transition at Grand River Center. It won't be exactly the same. They're two different buildings, a lot of things like that. But there is a twofold transitions that happen during this time. So there's the transition in of a new management company, and there's a transition out of the other management company. So there's dual, each of them have like kind of a templated list of what they do, and then they also have other things that are more specific to the facility, basically. And so each entity has their own things. And then I can tell you that, like, when we did Grand River Center, there's a lot of going back and forth and helping them to be able to make sure all the accounts get transferred, and what are all the accounts, and making sure that all the preventative maintenance lists move from the systems that are currently ASM Global, and they're transferred over so that they know what that is. And then there's the hiring of staff and all those kinds of elements that go along with it. There's they'll also so there's a lot to be done, which is more than you can do with just the people that you have. And so they bring in from all other facilities whatever they need to help backfill. Or, like, let's say there's a specific position that they're having trouble hiring. They will bring in from other facilities somebody to help temp in till they get that person in there, so that you're not without an individual in a real key position. So, for an example, it took us a little longer to hire a chef for Grand River Center. And what they did is the chef that was over in Waterloo, when they didn't have events, would come over and help with our events, and they would do that. They brought a couple corporate chefs in on different days when that person couldn't do it. So although we don't have a chef there, it would be a similar thing where essentially they make sure that all things are covered from day one.
Great, thank you. So there'll be perhaps a slowdown, but then they're ready to, they want to kick it back into gear.
Yeah.
All right, great, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Jones?
I'd just like to congratulate you on what I think is your last budget hearing. Oh, my God.
It will be, yes.
Just one general comment, and this relates back to the park hearing almost. One of the things, too, that's apparent in why this is so impossible is the scope of your position from the time you took it till now has changed dramatically. It's grown in a whole bunch of different directions, and become almost impossible, yet somehow you keep delivering, and I appreciate it very much. You've been great to work with, and look forward to working with you till your last day, but congratulations on not having to stand here doing this again.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Ms. Farber.
Ditto on that comment. Vicki.
Ms. Whiffle.
I want to start by saying your institutional knowledge is amazing, because you have been around for so many things that apply to so many things we're doing now. It blows me away. And I think my work with Friends of Minds of Spain, when I first started, within a few months, you just sat down and you're like, well, let me tell you about the history of this. I remember leaving that meeting thinking, wow, there's no one like Marie Ware. So anyway, I want to say thank you for your service to the residents of Dubuque. It's hard to match it. I'm going to dig us in a little bit, and I'm going to apologize at first here, but I'm going with it. I'm going to ask some questions about downtown TIF as it applies to the money that we have budgeted for Five Flags. I'm going to go off on a little bit of tangent here, and it has to do with safety, public safety in the downtown TIF area. So just correct me, Jenny, if I'm wrong on this. But what we have allotted for our budgetary process 2026 through 2030 for Five Flags money that we have set aside. If we had a public safety project in the downtown TIF district, the question I have is not, could we not fund what we have talked about doing at Five Flags, but could we postpone it by a year if, for this reason? We have worked with DMAT's ECIA on a quiet zone project. We understand that money that was requested initially through the Consolidation Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements, or CRISI grant, was not approved, and that the Federal Rail Crossing Elimination, or RCE grant, was also not approved. We had requested with each of those grants $2,960,000. 80% of the total cost. And then we had set aside $740,000 as a match for allotted funds to complete the project. So the Quiet Zone project, and I know everybody in council knows this, basically is to try and look at rail crossings in our downtown with the increased doubling of our rail traffic and doubling of the length of those trains in the coming year and years to come. And we are not going to have someone come in and save us. This grant issue is a big deal to me. It affects a lot of my constituents in Ward 4, and I know for you too, Mr. Sprank. And so if we don't have funding for rail crossings, and it could come out of downtown TIF, my question would be if any of my colleagues would have an appetite to consider looking at that funding specifically and not saying that we will not fund what we're doing and what we're looking at for Five Flags, but simply considering postponing it so that we could allot money that potentially could cover our quiet zone project.
Mike, I hear
Mr.
you
Mayor?
chiming in. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, thanks. Mike Van Milligan, City Manager. So there's a potential twist on what Councilmember Wethel is suggesting there, and so I'll bring this up, and I'm not trying to displace any suggestion. So if it's the suggestion was just made, then that's what it is. But it is accurate that it appears we did not get either of those two federal grants. While we have not received official notification on the notice of who did get the grants, which is on the federal website, we're not included. So we know official notification is coming. You did not get the grants. We do believe there's going to be another cycle of grants, however. So as opposed to budgeting the full, and I'll use a round number of $3.5 million to do the quiet zone project, one potential option is to take $750,000 from FY27 Five Flags, where there's $2.75 million budgeted, $750,000, and reserve that as a match for another grant application. Because while we previously had the match budgeted, we don't have it in the next 5-year budget. So, and this is how I understand it. And if I'm wrong, I'm sure Jennifer will correct me, Jennifer Larson. But anyway, so that's another potential option here, is to just take $750 from the $2.75 million in FY27 from the Five Flags debt issuance and reserve it as a match for another grant. Now, you could be sitting, if you did that, you could be sitting here in 6 or 9 or 12 months saying, okay, well, we're exactly where we were last year, and we didn't get those grants either, and now we have to come up with the rest of the money. And it doesn't preclude you doing what you're describing right now, because the way the 5-year CIP is built for the Five Flags Center, while there's about $500,000 of existing money in FY26, the budget you're discussing, there's a very small amount in the CIP budget. I don't remember what the number is, but the big dollars start in FY27 to build up for the full 24 million through FY30, the end of the 5-year CIP. So hopefully my description was cogent enough that it could be understood, but that's just another potential option.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump into, so first of all, I appreciate the focus on getting this project done. I absolutely do. I think it's really important, and it's been something that, like, I mean, I know, I sat in your seat for a little bit and got the same phone calls about the quiet zone being necessary and all those things. And the quiet zone is more than just quiet. It's about safety. It's about getting trains through and moving them. Here, I see, my problem with this though is I see multiple variables at play that make this really complicated. For one, let's just go with Five Flags for a second. We have the money planned and we're ready to go. I mean, we're going to start this process next year, or this year, and we're going to start, actually we've started already, I should correct myself there, and we are going to continue to walk through and get this done on a project that is probably about 15 years overdue, an important project for the community. When we talk about the quiet zone, my biggest concern with this is that it sounds simple on its face. You spend money, you build safe crossings, and you go. There are two separate railroads that we have to negotiate with to be able to get this done. And it's why we sit on the DMATS board, the Dubuque Metropolitan Area Transportation Study Board, to be able to talk to them and move this type of funding through that board to be able to get these things done. So it shows up in the city of Dubuque CIP to do these things, but it's through the DMATS connection that we get all that done. And I'm thinking back to the B Branch project, and I'm pretty sure that it was 11 years that we negotiated with the railroads before we were able to drill underneath them to be able to finish that project. I could be off by a year or two, I'm not sure. But it was, and I am not disparaging the railroads. I want to make that really, really clear. I'm not disparaging the railroads in talking about this. But there's just from my experience in listening to the institutional knowledge of people like Marie and Darren Meering and the people that have worked with the railroad, there is a process that is followed that is just sort of the natural way of things in working with the railroad. That isn't just you identify the dollars you need and go spend. There's a time frame that goes through. And Mike, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that time frame also works in historically can work a little more effectively when you have like Federal Railroad Administration money in hand, like a Chrissy grant and those kinds of things, to be able to do that work. That is different than just putting out a work for RFP and getting stuff built at Five Flags. Is anything I'm saying inaccurate, or I'm sorry, yeah, inaccurate? It's getting late. Is anything I'm saying inaccurate, Mike, or is that, would you agree or disagree?
Well, I think what you're saying is very accurate, and my recollection was it was 11 years. We both might be wrong, but I think it was 11 years of negotiation. The little nuance of difference here is the railroad never really cared whether we corrected that flooding problem or not. That wasn't their issue.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of I think they're more all in on this quiet zone idea. They like the idea of that happening too, because then their trains will be less nuisance to our residents, get less complaints, and they like rail safety. They sure don't want somebody getting hurt at their rail line. So I think the negotiation process, as a matter of fact, I think they've even offered to support our applications for funding and things like that. So I think the negotiation process would be much quicker and easier, but your description is pretty accurate.
Other thoughts?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I'd be definitely in support of this. It's safety, and it just makes sense to me if this is possible. So yes.
And I think, if I might, just the one thing that Mr. Van Milligan touched on, we have 2 letters of support that we attach to our grant applications from railroads. Mm-hmm. If there was ever a time to strike when the iron's hot, we've got everything teed up that we had when we applied for the grant with the paperwork and the process. They paid, was it $100,000 to help close one crossing for us? I don't foresee in the coming years that there are going to be legitimate federal options coming to this. And the safety of our community, I mean, when we talk about the importance of having a safe place at Five Flags for disaster relief and those kind of things, I believe it. But if there's one thing we're responsible for as a city government, it's the safety of our residents. And so I'm not trying to take away from Five Flags and the wonderful work that they do and the importance of our community. But this is a little bit of a go time.
Other thoughts here? Mr. Resident.
Yeah, there's a lot to consider here. That's my feeling, that I don't want to, I know you want to set it aside or not, and we can have further consideration. So I don't even know what to say to that, because there's a whole lot I need to learn about this and then consider. As you mentioned, you have been, Ms. Wethel, considering this for a while, I can see. I would like to hear other points of view. Mr. Van Milligan from afar has made some other comments, and I would like to hear, when he comes back too, so we could get a full and maybe some exploring by city staff about this particular situation, because I don't have a pro and con kind of list right now. That if Mr. Mayor, you can tell me this: by putting things aside, are we asking city staff to try and get us enough information to make an informed decision? And by the time this is out, this budget session is done, do you think we can do that?
Well, to answer your first question, yeah, I think when we put something aside, we're asking our city staff to look into it. Absolutely. Can we figure it out by the end of this month? I don't know. This is a complicated one. I mean, this is not an easy suggestion. This has a lot of things that I agree need to be considered, that I'm not so sure that we've got the time to do that in a matter of 3 weeks. But I mean, I could be wrong. So I don't know if I answered your question well or not.
You did, and I would, at this time, vote not to set it aside.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, Mr. Jones.
I don't think we need to set it aside if we're talking about $27. We've got a year to get to that decision point, frankly.
Good point.
The other thing I'll say is the quiet zone does include a lot of safety improvements, but it's not unsafe right now. The difference is it's safe right now because of train horns that blow all hours of the day and night. But we don't have an epidemic of people getting run over by trains, thank God. The other thing I'll say, and there's nothing we can do about this, is this should not be our responsibility. The railroads create this problem. The railroads should own this problem. The railroad should fix this problem. Federal law isn't going to bend to that, to me wanting that or thinking that. The fact is the railroads have all the cards and have every right under federal law to make the noise, operate on the tracks and everything else. Now, the community's waited for decades for us to fix Five Flags, and it's an equal safety concern of mine that plaster's not going to fall on a patron in the theater, that a piece of masonry is not going to fall off the outside. All of that needs to be fixed, and we've had meeting after meeting after meeting in this room for 15 years talking about how are we going to finally fix Five Flags. So I don't support that at all. I do, however, support that we dig in and pursue the quiet zone improvements by one method or another. And it may well be that after our engineers, after our conversations with our federal and state partners, after our conversations at DMATS, after staff's analysis, that the recommendation comes to us, yeah, we're going to have to move some money from something. And maybe it'll be from Five Flags at that point. But I don't think we're at that point yet where we're going to say, let's not do this project that we've been trying to do for decades to make our downtown quieter. Because it's not going to make it safer. It's going to make it harder to get hit by a train. That's true. But it's already hard to get hit by a train. So I don't want to make a hasty move that doesn't advance either of these programs. I think we've got a lot to learn about. I think we know a lot about the quiet zone issue and what's needed, but I think there's an awful lot of conversation that has to happen between now and a decision on how to get there.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just agree with my colleagues to the right.
Okay. Ms. Roussel, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I think that this decision may be best served in the fiscal year 2027 budget. And I wouldn't support holding this for this year's discussion.
Thank you. So there's a couple things I want to say. First of all, I appreciate the creative thinking. I really do. I think this is an interesting way to think about how do we get something done that we are not currently able to do because we're losing the opportunity, the current opportunity at federal funding. A couple of things. One is I have to agree with the Five Flags assessment of Mr. Jones and everybody on this side. I think that we have been talking about this since before I had the honor of sitting at this desk at all. And I think that it is, we have it right in front of us and we need to go and do it. I just think we got to go and do it. It's time to get this done. And frankly, my bigger concern is that $25 million is not going to be enough to do everything that we really want to do. So that's all there. So I think I'm on that end, I want to just move. But there's a larger issue at play here that I want to make sure that I bring up. You know, I know we're concerned about federal funding. I know we're very concerned about what's going to happen for the next few years. Because for the last 3 months, it has been really unpredictable to figure out what the heck is going on. I mean, it's just really, really unpredictable. But I do think that it's important that we all do our very best in these roles to step back from that and stay as focused as we can on the things that we have to do, because I do think that the unpredictability, I could be wrong about everything I'm saying. I think the unpredictability will begin to settle eventually, because, to speak frankly, everybody who's elected by the people who elect them needs to get things done for the people who elect them. They have to. And specifically, our members of Congress they come to this community to tour the projects that they were a part of. I do not think this is the end of federal government funding coming to the city of Dubuque. And I think we need to, and I've shared the same concerns here. I've shared the same, we've had these discussions, and you've heard me talking about this, about the unpredictability and the challenges ahead of us. But I don't think that means that we need to assume right now that we will not get, for instance, these railroad funds in the next 3 years. There's a good solid chance that we might, because this is a project that needs to get done, and it's one that would easily be able to, something we could all show off together. So all that said, I think I completely get the sentiment. I really do. And I think it's really creative to think about it this way. But I have to agree. I don't think this is the place to pull funding from to be able to do that particular project.
Can I just respond real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I appreciate Mr. Van Milligan stating that this would be pulling $750,000 from FY27. So this is thinking ahead about the future of our Five Flags funding. Just as I said the other night about creating funding for tuition reimbursement. I am not against it. I am not against Five Flags funding. I'm going to say that again. I am not against Five Flags funding. It's in my ward. I'm worried about it. I want it done more than anybody else up here, I swear to you. But my responsibility is to look out for every option creatively as I can see fit to potentially go for and reserve money for a future grant. And this is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to talk about creative things we could do to look ahead. I'm just trying to do that. And I'm not trying to pull money away from something that's very important to me and those residents I serve. So I just want to say that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, I totally understand what you're saying. I definitely see that is an important thing. And again, we are trying to be creative. This is probably one of the more creative thinking budget processes that we've been through so far, just trying to figure some of these things out. So, okay. Well, we don't have the support to be able to hold that at this time, so we can move on from that suggestion. Is there any other questions or anything we want to talk about with Five Flags? Other than I've seen two of the best shows I've seen in a long time there in the last 2 years. So thank you for that. And Aaron, thank you very much for being here tonight and for all the work that you and your team do. We notice it, so thank you. Well, before we go, I think Marie deserves a hand for her final budget hearing, so thank you. You're not leaving yet, but we already miss you, so. All right, well, thanks everybody for another great night. We are going to be back here tomorrow for our final budget hearings this week. For tonight, we will be adjourned.